Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, and for the second week in a row we're going to be giving you the highlights and the lowdown on the Edinburgh Fringe Festival 2009. And as I said last week, it's the largest arts festival in the world. And one of the sections, which is very well represented, is musical theatre. But there's far too much to see. So Tim Saward and myself are going to be bringing you just a few of the bits and pieces that came our way in a very, very busy week at the Edinburgh Fringe. You'll be hearing interviews with many of the people behind shows, actors, actresses, writers, directors, performers, and you'll also be hearing an awful lot of rain, because the fun of Edinburgh takes place in darkened rooms, otherwise known as theatre auditoria, and so it doesn't matter that the weather got progressively worse, but you will certainly hear rain in some of these interviews. In between these interviews, you'll be hearing a selection of our Twitter reviews, 2-minute looks at some of the shows, many of which have been published on our Twitter feed, on the Musical Talk website, and you'll also get to hear just some of the atmosphere of what it's like in Edinburgh during the Fringe. It's a marvellous, magical place. I can't get enough of it. And for Musical Talk, I took a walk down the Royal Mile, which is a long road linking Edinburgh Castle to the Scottish Parliament and Holyrood House, which is the traditional palace of the Scottish royal family, and which is, in its own right, a mile. But it's also the traditional place during the Fringe for people who have got shows to advertise to gather, to hand out leaflets, flyers, to perform, to encourage people to come and see their shows. And the atmosphere is genuinely electric. And the array of shows we have for you this week is even more extensive than last week, in that we have shows which are as old as the 19th century, that's The Pirates of Penzance by Gilbert and Sullivan, shows which are absolutely up to date and have been written specifically for Edinburgh, such as Chat and many others, and of course shows that come from the 20th century. And we'll open our show today with one of those, a review of Snoopy, 3 exclamation marks, the musical.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Fringe.
My name is Jay Green, and this is my 14th Fringe, and it's far too many for anybody. And I'm the Director of Drama at Oakham School. You've just seen their work, and I write and direct outside as well.
I am Kim Smith. I'm up here with Oakham with 4 shows. I've AD'd and was the choreographer on Snoopy, which is what you just saw, so it's all very exciting.
So, tell me, how did Snoopy... Why did you bring Snoopy to the Edinburgh Fringe this year? What was the attraction?
My godfather was the MD on the original production,
Really?
Dennis King, and large parts of my childhood seemed to be spent watching Dennis's shows, so Snoopy was one of them. And
is this the Dennis King who wrote the Black Beauty theme tune?
That's the man.
Good Lord. A man of some renown.
A dear friend of mine. My father was Benny Green, and they were good friends.
Your father was Benny Green?
I'll throw that one in for you. As a musicals man, you know.
I may now just have to sort of pick my jaw off the floor, if I may say. I've been listening. Well, I did listen to him for many years.
Yeah. So did I, yeah.
Well, that's something for later. So, musical director in the 70s?
Yeah, he played piano and MD'd it, I think, when it was originally on. So.
And of course it's an American musical first, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was off Broadway, wasn't it? And then it came over here.
So.
I think so. I mean, and it's potted around the circuit for years now. I mean, I did it 10 years ago at a different institution. Kim's just done a great job with it now. Obviously, the director isn't with us today through ill health, so Julie Norell needs to be credited for her superb direction. And what you see is Kim's work and her work up there as well. And it's one of those great shows that works because kids are playing kids. They don't have to pretend to be adults. You know, it's much easier for the audience to buy into.
Although that's a little disingenuous
It
in
is.
a way, isn't it? Because if I may say, because I don't think the children in Peanuts, the comic strip from which it's based, are in any way like children. That's the joy of it, isn't it?
Well, the joy of it is you've got that script, which is really adult philosophy, wrapped up within the childhood presentation. Yeah,
it's almost. This is a word I use too much, but it's strangely elegiac, I think. Actually,
well, I think so. Yeah, there's a sense of loss in so much of that. And that last number, you can go 2 ways. That last number. I mean, it's it's so saccharine, or it's deeply moving, and we get the two extremes in the audience.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's at least one person I've spoken to who sat there in tears, being so moved by it, and I've also seen people going.
Yeah.
It's a song essentially about if one person believes it's new, then a second one will join, and
I
eventually
know, and that terrible line about making it a threesome. and you know,
or there was a ripple. There
Yeah,
was a ripple in the audience.
there's always a ripple there.
Yeah.
In the digital age,
It's
there's
taken
always a
them a
ripple on
while to
that.
get over the
Yeah,
line
yeah.
themselves.
But funny enough, you just mentioned the digital age. That's quite interesting because the play doesn't feel like it could reflect children. I know it isn't children,
Correct,
but today it feels very. They talk about the 1970s,
it's absolutely.
and which is my generation of being a child,
Yeah.
and if you know, it feels very much like that. You find fun and imagination in what's going on.
Yes, there's a simplicity and an innocence to it that.
So as a show, it does bring you straight back to your own innocent self, if you can find it again, which is
It's
very
interesting,
nice.
Yeah, it does, and it's
Yeah.
interesting because we were talking with the cast, and they will reflect on the fact that. I remember playing doctors, or I remember going outside, playing baseball. It's interesting. It evokes even memories in those.
I wonder
kids
if it
that
works
are,
because it evokes a safer childhood as well,
Yeah.
a simpler childhood, a time when children were children, even though they spoke like adults in this. That somehow there's a simplicity to it that I think today's kids have lost. And I know my own kids are 11 and 14 now, and they see this show and they go wide-eyed in a way that they don't when they see the In-Betweeners or whatever they're watching on telly.
But it does respond. They do respond to
Oh
it.
yeah.
Now that's interesting. So it's still got an emotional pull. I mean, it works for
I
my
think so.
generation.
I
I
think
was
if you-
very interested to learn that.
I think if you play it straight, you have to play
Yeah.
it straight.
Yeah,
The minute you
completely,
start to send that up, you're sunk.
then it doesn't work at all
No,
as music.
no.
So your involvement as choreographer.
Yes, yeah, and the director can't be with us at the moment, so I was assistant directing and have taken over since we've been up here.
So
as
how has
well.
it changed? I mean, how much tweaking have you had to do, do you think?
Well,
Because
no,
it was
actually,
a very accomplished cast, actually. I'll say that immediately. I didn't think there were any weak spots. I mean, it's all about how much oomph you give it and not too much
absolutely,
oomph as well. In certain cases,
absolutely.
so.
The injection of energy, you can cover anything with a bit of energy. It's not, to be fair, not too bad, because when we were rehearsing back at school, we actually set the space up as it would be here. Now, the only problems I had when I got here were the lovely pillars that were there.
Sight lines.
Yeah, exactly.
And dance lines.
And dance
quiet.
lines. Though it was a bit wider than I was anticipating, so that was quite nice. Just to, so there was a few tweaks, but not too bad. It was okay. And they're becoming more comfortable, because some of them aren't dancers, some of them don't, and they're becoming much more comfortable with what they're doing.
I think the choreography is imbued with a sense of fun. I particularly like the better to be a tree than a leaf, that particular song, where you because it becomes it's a Gilbert and Sullivan Patter song, essentially, isn't it?
Totally,
It builds up to a whole series of things, and you've given them an action for everything. So there's the boat and the coat and the leaf and the tree, and
It's a lot of fun also, because the audience are going, are they going to get it right? Are they going to remember the order? It's like that game when I went to the shops and I bought, and it's that sort of But I think the choreography with it's got to be fun. It's got to be light. It's not sort of hugely complicated in a way. Yeah.
Did you give the girl who plays Woodstock fantastically, by the way, but for what is quite a small part, but actually really quite a nice little extra part, if you like. I don't know how to describe it. I think it's important, certainly the relationship with Snoopy. But that first scene where she comes on and flutters, or he, I suppose I ought to say,
flutters
flutters around the space in love, which also it's very nice to see that kind of the way he's portrayed as flying in the comic strips. Actually, it suddenly came to life.
Yeah. That was the intention behind it, really. We tried, but it's a very difficult part because of the lack of words and because it's random points. And we tried various things out, but it was sort of choreographed-ish, and then she sort of added that kind of clumsiness to it as well.
For some reason, that seems a ridiculous thing to say, but I can also see sort of Anthony Newley's kind of sort of full-on clown in that.
Yes, I think there's some very Anthony Newley traits in several places in that musical, actually.
In the songs, one or two
yes,
cases.
absolutely, yes, indeed. As Kim was talking about tweaking the show for the space, and of course we do that, but I think there's something much bigger as well that we tweak when we arrive at Edinburgh, and that really is the purpose of the whole project, which is that we brought 28 kids up here in 4 shows. Every kid's in 2 shows. And it's the bridge here. Edinburgh's the bridge for us between, we play to school audiences, maybe 1,000 in a week. That's easy enough, but it's your mates. It's making the bridge now into an audience you don't know, who aren't on your side, you have to win over. And we have 2 bridging projects. 3 actually. One is Edinburgh, which we do every other year. And in those years we also do NSDF at Scarborough. Yes. And then alternate years we tour overseas. So next summer we're in India. Last summer we're in Canada. So we believe very much in taking kids out on the road with musicals. We don't view musicals any different from mainstream theatre. We've got a devised piece up here, new writing. It's all entertainment. And our aim is very much to be the premier drama department in the country. And we believe in getting kids out on the road.
So that's almost the philosophy of your organisation. So it's Oakham School.
Oakham School, yeah.
And you represent the Running Torch Theatre Company.
Yeah, Running Torch is our touring name on the road. It comes from the school's somewhat pretentious Latin motto, like runners, they pass on the torch of life. And
Splendid.
Yes, exactly. We're a very august old school.
There's a lyric in there somewhere.
There is, not one I'm care to use that. But my father might have taken that challenge on. But it's in a kind of slightly corny way, I do believe that our job as directors, in a drama department in a school where we're privileged, we have a lovely theatre, we get support to go out on the road. It's about passing the torch on. And just because the project is a sweet kids project like Snoopy, that's a torch you pass on. That's classic musical theatre. It doesn't matter what the show is. There's a tradition of touring that goes back. I mean, we had a lovely endorsement of Simon McBurney at Complicity Day the other month. Who said that this goes back 500 years, and this is the important thing. You roll into town, you do your stuff, and you get out.
Hopefully you don't get out in the...
Hopefully you're not chased out.
Not because you have to.
No, hopefully you're not chased out, but it's that romantic ideal of,
you move on to the next.
You pitch your tent, you do it, and you go.
It's the Good Companions, isn't it?
Totally that, yeah.
A musical as well.
Indeed.
In fact, it was, if you don't mind me saying, it was listening to Benny Green's Radio 2 programme that got me into that.
Really?
Johnny Mercer's last...
Oh, yes.
And your father was a huge Johnny Mercer fan.
Oh, Johnny was lovely, yeah.
Sorry, I'm digressing. It's
all it's all right. I'm recessing.
I'll meet you somewhere in the middle. I think.
Okay.
Now, the score of Snoopy, it's by Larry Grossman.
Grossman
wrote the lyrics.
Grossman did the music, and Hackaday, I think, did the lyrics.
A very unfortunate name for a lyricist.
I know. But, and he teeters on the edge at times, but yes.
But I thought the score was quite interesting, because I have to say I didn't know it, and I as a show it's a little bit sketchy, isn't it? I mean, I don't mean that.
It hangs.
Yeah,
it hangs.
That's
together.
right. It's a series of episodes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't it?
But it is very much the comic strip. It's very much
yeah.
these bits of the comic strip.
You're probably
it's
right.
Not,
it
it's
echoes
not,
the rhythm of that, doesn't it?
It's not sort of here's the story we're following.
That's clever. I never thought of that.
Oh, well, that's what I do. But you're like it's Easter. It's Easter at one point, and then it's Christmas, and then it's.
I suppose there is a sort of seasonal cycle, isn't there?
There is, which we've tried to maintain, but it's slightly random in its approach.
But you do get, but it gives you almost, if you like, not one-liners because it's subtler than that, isn't it? But you get the response to a setup, and then presumably, if you were a comic strip on the day-to-day newspapers, you get the further development.
There's an East Coast rhythm to it, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
There's a punchline to it every time.
Yeah, there is.
Which is a strange one for our kids, and I'd imagine for British audiences, because as you know, British audiences are notoriously slow at getting the American rhythm of anything.
Indeed. Yes. Well, I think American television is making such forays onto our television.
Right.
You know, Frasier and Friends, things for better or for worse, are making us all.
Yes.
I think that's but that was our concern. I think when we were sort of directing it was the audience response, because it isn't. You're not following this through line, lovely through line to the end. It is what it is, and it's really about the characterization, which a lot of them do very well, and that engages you enough to sort of wait for them to come on.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there are two things, aren't there? It's you buy into the characters, and it's a question of the melodies are insistent enough, simple enough, and repetitive enough that they hook you.
But they're sweet, but there's more to it than sweet. There is a hook.
Absolutely, yes.
There's that lovely song that Linus sings when he's
the vigil.
Yes. But the song has a certain urgency, and and once again, some of the speed is almost this. I kept thinking every now and then, the resonances I got were Gilbert and Sullivan and Stephen Sondheim, and that's a very odd mixture. The song, The Poor Sweet Baby, every now and then sort of teetered into Sondheim territory, mostly in the power and actually the modulation of the music rather than the lyrics.
Is that the one that's got faintly countryish echoes as well?
Oh, right.
That's Daisy Hill.
Daisy Hill, which is that lovely kind of country pastiche as well.
That's when Snoopy's trying to regress back to his puppy farm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Snoopy's, it's called Snoopy the Musical. He's the central character, but of course he isn't in any real sense. It's an ensemble piece in its fullest.
Very much, yeah.
But the actor playing that has a harder part, because obviously, unlike young people playing younger versions of themselves, if you like, almost, or at least generically. Playing a dog is a different game, particularly if you've got a black nose.
He's done a lot of method work on it. We put him in kennels for 4 weeks before the show.
He was recently deloused, I like it.
Yes. And
I think it's a difficult role anyway, because you don't know how far to go with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't think I could handle a full dog suit on stage, because it would just ruin the general ambience. But it is that how far do you
Well, I thought it was pitched rather nicely because he's, if you remember the cartoon series, I mean, he was Joe Cool, wasn't he? And that's
exactly,
the way he's portrayed here, Dark Specs.
Which is exactly. So, but it's a problematic role in that respect because in terms of how you costume.
How did your cast take to it? How have they found it?
They're funny at school because we obviously, not always, but generally impose projects on. So we're doing this, you want to audition. Occasionally they devise their own work, but for the most part, we're coming with them with stuff that we try and do stuff right across the canon. So we do everything, a lot of Shakespeare, and we do classic musicals. Anything Goes this year, the Fantastics we've done, Snoopy. And I think they're probably quite used to the sort of stuff we throw at them that's outside their own particular general listening area. But there are also lots of kids in there who are in National Youth Music Theatre, who are very, very kids of theatre people as well. So they're probably quite steeped in that.
They're very accepting of it.
Yeah.
And what was really impressive, we did 2 weeks intensive rehearsal before we came up here. So we'd not looked at it at all in term time. Gave them all the stuff. And they all came back and they knew it, which
really?
I was bowled over by because you can't put on a musical in 2 weeks and make it slick if they don't know what they're doing when they step through the door on the first day, and they did, and it was great.
So they bought into it. The investment was
very much.
That's very much our ethos, I think, in terms of what we subscribe to. Here's the script. I mean, all 4 shows, in a sense, one was devised obviously, but they had a pack of material. All 4 shows. Here's the script. Here's the material. You go away, we'll see you on 20th of July, and we're going up on the 4th of August, and you better have a show by then.
Basically, yeah.
That's it.
But that's real theatre, isn't it?
That's exactly how it works, yeah. And we must replicate that. It's no good doing this, you see it in some schools, this sort of 6-month rehearsal period on a Friday afternoon, once a week. It's no good for anybody. Short, intensive stuff, and if you've got a problem, sort it out, don't come to us.
Where's it going next? Is it going anywhere further on?
No. This is the end of all 4 shows end in Edinburgh, and then 2 weeks later we start a 4 Shakespeare rep season, which we're touring to India.
So, is there a sort of generic website that people go to keep up with you?
Absolutely.
In time?
The best place to go to is www.oakham.rutland. That's an easy way of doing it. oakhamschool.com, I think.
Yeah, it's
just do a Google search for Oakham School. Come and see us in the drama department. We'd love to see anybody. Our work is open to everybody. We have 20-25 shows a year. Come and see us. Stay in touch, and
Well, best of luck for the rest of the run.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking to me. It was a great show.
Thank you
Glad
very
you
much.
enjoyed it.
And here's a Musical Talk Twitter review. Have a Nice Life.
Have a Nice Life is by Connor Mitchell, and it's an early work of his. It was actually featured 3 years ago in the Perfect Pitch Showcase, and has subsequently appeared, I think, at the New York Musical Theatre Festival. It's very well designed to fit a slot into there, and Connor is such a wide-ranging writer that I have no doubt that it was custom-made, really, for that kind of purpose. It is an American book musical with American characters, so slightly unusual for a Northern Irish writer, although that's not what he always does. It's enormously well crafted, and the lyrics are certainly one of Connor's greatest strengths. They are tremendously witty, very punny, smart. He's often compared to Sondheim, and I think with considerable justification, really, because he has that same sort of playfulness with language that Sondheim does, and he's always playing around with concepts. This is the story of a group doing group therapy, and a newcomer arrives in the group, which has a sort of galvanising effect on the whole thing and causes them to question, in a way, the whole rationale of what they're doing. It's not a perfect book, I have to say. There are character inconsistencies, and there are moments when some of the fun, retro, campy numbers based on Candor and Ebb, particularly like Chicago, for example, and also we had a sort of chorus line style number at the end.
It's Kurt Weill thing as well.
And Kurt Weill as well, yeah, we get a strong taste of. There are moments when those are more justified than others in terms of the character journeys, but nonetheless, a really strong piece, and actually I gave it 5 stars, and because unfortunately I'd already given some things 5 stars, which I didn't like quite as much, I've stuck a sneaky little extra one on the end.
So for you, this is the best thing you've seen so far?
This is the best thing I've seen so far, yeah. And I suppose to a certain extent the weight of expectation was there, because I have seen a lot of Connor's work before, and he's generally thought of as the best hope, certainly for for intellectual musical theatre, stuff that is about thinking as well as
intelligent,
thinking. And to me, although not for everybody, his scores are very gorgeous, very lush. I think his music, which takes strongly after mid-20th century classical music, is is really pleasant to listen to, and his harmony writing, particularly his vocal harmony writing, is excellent. So even for this early work.
Conversely, I enjoyed it a very great deal, but I thought it misfired. When it was doing its pastiches, it wasn't quite melodic enough in those areas to really carry them off, I thought, with the exception of the finale. But then again, I didn't like the last 20 minutes of the piece, which I thought was when the book faltered most.
Yeah, I think the problem with all those scenarios is that you with an ensemble piece, you've always got to kind of work out what binds together, and of course the chorus line, they're all going for the same thing, and sometimes they're not bound together at all, and that's when they fail, those pieces. And this had a slight case of, I think it was clear why they were all in the same situation, because it was group therapy. I don't know that it managed to... The commentary it made about group therapy, and that was there, it was present, about kind of analysing the purpose of it. I don't know that all added up to one really strong concept, but the character writing was just really good. Like, the truth of the character writing, the ellipticalness, the elliptical nature of kind of the way that they spoke. Nobody said what they felt directly, which is kind of a massive failing of pretty much most musicals of this kind that you get to see. Actually, one character did say what they felt directly, which was the mailman. And that
By which you mean a postman, yes.
Yes, indeed. Well,
not just a man who
New
was
York,
mail, it's
yeah,
in
indeed,
a
yes.
tautological sense.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, that was, for me, the least successful number precisely for that reason, is that he kind of seemed to complete a self-analysis and then kind of deny that he had a problem, and that didn't seem truthful to me. But all the others had a big problem that they weren't quite in control of, and that they revealed through their actions much more than through and through their dialogue, inadvertently. And that's kind of much more skillful writing than I'm afraid we see in character-based comedies, as a rule.
A 5-star show. It's Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Fringe.
At George Square 2, at the moment, we have running 6 Ways, which is a collaboration between 3 people who all were together at LIPA, the Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, who are Michael Bradley, who's the composer, David Hutchison, who is the book writer, and I'm here with the lyricist, Paddy Clark. Paddy, can you tell us something about the show?
Yes, I can tell you that it's the story of 3 different couples, each searching for, what they personally view as the perfect relationship. The show begins with them establishing they may not be perfectly happy with their relationship, and it concludes in, I can't give too much away, but a similar way. And it's basically a process of reflection. Some have already seen it as, and it technically is, a morality piece to show the journey that many people go through. It deals with very common issues, from, suspected adultery to addiction, and to career. Things that affect pretty much everyone in some sort of way.
1 or 2 slightly less common issues, like having a husband who's in drag and stuff like that. Is that?
Yeah, it's not the most traditional relationship that you see, but it's part of that was to do with actually helping the script get along in a certain way. I mean, it proved a slightly more dramatic way of showing it, and it worked in that way. But it verges on a comedic device in some ways, and it's a bit of light entertainment in the piece. But it also provides for some of the sincerest moments. It has some really touching moments where career proves a competitor for love.
Definitely an unconventional way to approach a love story. So where did the idea come from?
I think I wasn't actually involved at the very start of the process. It originally started with David Hutchinson and Michael Bradley, both working on several concepts. They'll tell you themselves, but verging from incest, drug addiction, many, many different drafts before they eventually came up with a fairly stable plot, which we workshopped for, it's been the best part of 5 months pretty much, and that itself changed a lot. Even we started rehearsing about 2 months ago, and the first 3-4 weeks of rehearsal was spent redrafting the script, so it went through a lot of metamorphosis, to be honest.
Are your cast mainly drawn from LIPA as well, or?
Yes, they're all drawn from LIPA. It proved convenient because we're based. Most of us are based in Liverpool. I'm from down south, but it meant that since I'm up there all the time and they are at LIPA, it's a good rehearsal space, and they're very well trained.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Very extremely good singing on display there. So is this the first project you've worked on together as a team, 3 of you?
It is, yes. David Hutchinson is with Celador production company, and he's previously taken shows to Edinburgh. I'm not sure about the individual shows themselves. I didn't see it last year, But yeah, this is the second time I think at the festival with that company. But it's our first time the three of us writing together, yeah.
So just tell us about your sort of approach to the lyrics and so on. I mean, were you there quite at the... it wasn't quite at the outset of the book writing process, so in a way your kind of challenge was to kind of find the voice for these characters, I guess.
Yeah, well, to be honest, even though they'd gone through various different scripts and they did come up with a fairly solid idea, it was still very up in the air. So once I was pretty much given the first two scenes, a few melodies from Michael and a brief synopsis. And actually from then on, I pretty much wrote the whole of the lyrics in one go and then brought them to Michael. We spent the first part of the process actually apart in different cities because Dave was spending time at home, Michael was in Liverpool, and I was down in Surrey. It wasn't until I went back up to Liverpool with my lyrics that it started coming together. And then from then on I was entirely involved in a lot of the music writing as well with Michael Bradley. And also it's worth mentioning that the cast themselves were massively involved in the development of the script. It did change in subject and in structure from their involvement as well.
So if we had to sort of describe, I'm sure you would want to label it, but if we had to describe a style, what would you tell?
I'd go for... in terms of the music, it's definitely a contemporary pop style of musical theatre. But when it comes to the script and the structure, even though there are very contemporary problems in there, I feel it's quite old-fashioned compared to some musical theatre. A lot of the stuff I see up at Edinburgh is... it's not just for a niche market, but it's definitely not a gimmick. A lot of the stuff I see up here, but it's a certain idea that they've thought that's very interesting. We'll deal with that. Whereas there's nothing necessarily striking about the basic characters of Six Ways. Obviously, there is a drag queen storyline to accompany a politician storyline, but it's not. When you look at it, it's not that controversial. It's actually quite old-fashioned in essence.
Character-driven.
Yeah, definitely.
And in terms of the sort of, so we said contemporary pop. Are we in the world of Jason Robert Brown, that sort of thing?
We are, yeah. I know for a fact that's one of Michael's big influences. And referencing songs to Jason Robert Brown, William Finn, other composers who we both like. Michael the more so, as he's the more in the know-how when it comes to musical theatre. But yeah, I'd say Jason Robert Brown is an influence.
Can we say who would enjoy the show? I know that obviously the show is aimed at everybody because that's what writers always say. But
of course they do.
but if it's aimed at a specific sector of a wide market, where would we go?
I'd go for the middle-aged to middle-aged market in terms of. I mean, you're talking from young adults to people who are married and who've gone through problems. And real theatre veterans who are much older, I think they'll also take some joy in it. There's some very mature themes in there as well, and not in the sense of stuff that a child couldn't watch, but maybe only an adult could understand. And obviously, it's not suitable for very, very young kids because of certain words used. But it does suit a wide audience, and it's not just a way of promoting the show. It's a pretty broad audience.
Anyone who's ever had a relationship.
Yeah. Pretty much.
There we go. Thank you very much indeed, Paddy Clark. And you can see Six Ways, a new musical at George Square 2 at 2 o'clock on every other day. It's alternating with Falsetto Land, which is also produced by the same company, and it's running there until August the 31st.
Musical Talk Twitter review.
Six Ways that I saw the following day, and it's a new musical. It's sort of grown out of the Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, probably somewhat under some of the guidance of Nick Phillips, I would guess, who's also been a big mentor to Michael Bruce, who's suddenly very hot property in musical theatre, who we'll talk about in a bit. This is one of those couples musicals where there are three couples, a bit like Tomorrow Morning by Lawrence Wythe and so on, and they all, and indeed like Baby as well, but they all have a sort of perspective on an individual question. However, I wasn't completely sure what the question was in this case, as opposed to Tomorrow Morning, where they're focused on the day of their marriages, and as opposed to Baby, where of course it's about the desire to have a baby. The review I gave of it was smart JRB style. That's Jason Robert Brown, obviously. Jason Robert Brown style songs, sung really well and characters good, but the book doesn't quite combine six into one, and I think that's about as fair as I can be about the book. The songs, if you like Jason Robert Brown and you like the last 5 years, you would absolutely love, because it's a lot of emoting and a lot of ballady stuff. I like, again, a few more of the black notes to be used where possible, but I think that they did. It's a very accomplished first musical, and I would imagine that in the future, perhaps from that same team, we might hear stuff that really knocks your socks off. I think that was it worked in many ways, and it certainly worked a good deal better than Over the Threshold did in having interlinked characters and a plot. Unfortunately, the plot sort of vanished a little bit into the background because, of course, the main focus, if you're trying to write that kind of show, is on the sort of standalone audition songs that are Anglished women can sing in auditions.
If they're not doing Crimea River.
Exactly, which indeed. Because the thing is, because people who are doing castings get very bored of hearing the last 5 years, because it was kind of pretty much designed as a set of audition songs. So
They've heard nothing else for the last 5 years.
I guess that you could do a lot worse if you're an actor than suddenly look into this one 6 ways for some new material, so that they haven't heard 100 times before.
So it's a great potential for audition pieces.
Yeah, which I think is pretty much what motivates all such music.
It's Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Fringe.
I'm Matthew Eberhardt. This is Edinburgh Fringe 2009.
It is.
And yes, I was involved with Baby.
Now, how exactly were you involved with Baby, Matthew?
Well, I directed it. I'm really
one of the progenitors. Then.
Well, yes, and there were 3 of us involved. There's myself, as a director. There's Joe Bunker, who was a musical MD and the person who knew of the show in the first place, and the guy who recommended it to me. And there's Rich Bates, who was our brilliant producer.
Now, how did you alight upon Baby?
Yeah, I think as I say, I was at the Fringe last year, and we did a piece of new writing, and it was a really big, large-scale musical. And I thought, if I come back to the Fringe, which I'd love to do, I'd want to come back to George Square, because it's about musicals here, and that's what I like doing. And secondly, I wanted to do a musical that I thought would work well at the Fringe, and I think that's a different sort of musical to the musical that might work anywhere else. So I think one of the big things that struck us with Baby is that we thought it could be condensed into a one-act show, could be an hour and 15, which is great. And actually, you wouldn't, in many ways, we almost feel it was slightly improved by doing that actually it works better in that scenario than being a big two-actor. In many ways, the show is very much like, it's quite modern in many ways, and it sort of works in the same vein as shows like I Love Your Perfect Now Change, in the sense that it's all about, nothing really happens. Yeah, it's all Baby is born, but other than that, there are no real events.
It's an episodic development of relationships.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's very sort of like circumstantial, and something happens, and you sing about it, and I think that meant that we could cut scenes and change them around, and you still wouldn't lose what the show was ideally about. Yeah, the integrity of the show. Yeah.
Can I just take you back a step, however?
Yeah, sure.
Because it's very interesting what you said about it being an Edinburgh show. Now, I didn't know the piece.
Yeah.
I suspected it was a 2-part musical, but obviously when I saw it, it was only 1 part, as you say, 75 minutes.
Sure.
And to me, it felt just right. It was not too long, it wasn't too short,
sure.
And it felt like it was written as an integrated 1-act piece.
Yeah.
So you've obviously done a very good job of adaptation there. But is there anything else? It's not purely just logistics you're talking about when you talk about it being an Edinburgh show, are you? Several other people have made a very similar observation, so I'd just like to probe you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what we like about it is that I think the music is quite immediate and catchy. I think you listen to the music and you quite like it. And I think that really gives a show something. It's hard. I just sort of, I think also with the subject matter of the show, it doesn't try to do much. Like it's quite honest. It is what it is really, and I don't think it tries to be anything beyond that. I think that's really, really good for Edinburgh. Because I think when people come and book to see a musical, they don't want to, if they book to see theatre, they may want to see rape, murder, what have you, all these things. I think people come to see a musical, they want to see something that is enjoyable, which is quite light, and I'd like to think that Baby is light. I mean, it's serious, but I don't think it's heavy going. I think it's quite light generally. And I think that it sort of, fits into your day when you're seeing 6 or 7 shows. I think this is a show that may not be the one that does huge emotional things to you, but it will just be a nice light show and you will enjoy watching it.
Well, you don't necessarily want a Wagner musical.
No, exactly. And I think at the Fringe, when people, it's something light, something that they're going to catch on to, and and for a show to work in an hour and 15, it needs to, as I say,
a bit of pace.
Yeah, it needs to. Yeah, that's good.
But as director, and you did a spiffing job, if you don't mind me saying, as director, how did you approach it? What tone did you give it? Because you just said light. I think you've undersold yourself there, if you don't mind me saying. It had a lightness of touch.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it was touching on several profound things.
Yes.
And I don't mind telling listeners that I'm not the first person to go and see a musical about babies and the nature of relationships that there's going to the effect it's going to have.
Yeah, sure.
But I was won over by it, and I was more won over by the relationships where it didn't succeed without breaking too much of a story.
Yes.
So I think it was deeper than.
Yes.
I think it was deeper than just light. It had lightness in it. So how did you see it?
I think it's. Yeah, I think as you say, well, it's funny actually. As you say, I mean, just going back a little bit, we when we first chose to do the show, we managed to get in touch with Maltby Jr., who's the guy who wrote the lyrics. Chris Grady managed to put us in touch with him.
Really?
And what we managed to get was a recent version of the script, which is very different to the one they put on in Broadway in whatever 1970, 80 something. And in that one, there were more babies born at the end, I'll put it that much.
Really? Oh, it's changed quite significantly.
Yes, it has changed quite significantly. And when we found this new script, we thought, yes, a lot of the problems and issues we had with the show originally were then solved actually with the new script.
Is this now the authorised version as far as
this is the one, this is the one that they're using. It only as a 2-act show, so all the cutting was on what we did on our part.
But with his blessing?
Yes, with his blessing, and we were in contact with him. We talked about a lot of the cuts with him, we suggested certain things, and certain things he said, no, I don't need you to do that, but you could do this, and we sort of explained that, and we went through and we changed it went. So yeah, he was very much involved with that. The show's quite funny, I think, and I quite like that about it. I think it has that sort of depth to it, but at the same time it has a certain comedy about it. And also what I love about it is I think it's a musical. There are lots of musicals, obviously Edinburgh, which do the something the musical, which is essentially this is taking the mick out of something, and I think Baby doesn't do that. I think it tries to. It's something a bit different to that.
It's not Baby exclamation mark.
No, exactly.
No, it's
not even Baby the musical. It's just Baby.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of credit. I think for me as a director, that's what I wanted to get across. That sort of honesty, whilst keeping what is funny in there, because I think that adds so much. But that's why I particularly like it. And while I thought it'd be nice to bring it to Edinburgh for that reason, I think that it is trying to be honest and just trying to do something very simple.
How successful do you think you've been? I will give you an answer as well, but I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, sure. I think we've been fairly successful. I mean, it hasn't been easy. I'll put it that far.
Right, go on. What have been the principal difficulty?
Well, it's. I mean, there were 3 stories, and the problem with it, I think,
it's essentially 3 couples.
So 3 couples, yeah, and there were sort of 3 strands almost that go through. For a long time, we had 3 bits of story that didn't link up and didn't feel like a show, and there were a few cutting things we were having problems with, like we thought certain things were cut in certain ways and it didn't quite work. And we made our final cut about 3 days ago in terms of taking out a bit more material.
Really?
Just to tighten it. And we opened about 4 or 5 days ago. There was a couple of days when it was after the previews we decided there was something else had to go. But I think people really that come and see it really enjoy it, and they go and tell people that they really enjoyed it. And I think that's sort of that's a great response. We're really happy with that. I think it's going to be quite hard work for us to sell it over the course of the month, because I think if you like musicals, you'll really like it. I think if you don't like musicals, there'll be certain things about it that you may not get. But that's the format. I mean,
but who's going to come to George Square if they don't like musicals?
Well, exactly, and that's why it's so good to be here. I think on the whole, yeah. But as I say, if people, 5-6 days ago, there were times when we were going. I mean, there was a moment when I didn't think the show was going to work. I thought we were never going to get these 3 stories to become a show, and I was worried about have we picked the right show? Is this a strong enough show? It was in our dress rehearsal actually. It didn't. I was a bit sort of pessimistic after that, and as soon as we got an audience in, somehow the material really lifted off the page.
It coalesces as well.
Yeah, it really does, and there were so many things in that I didn't know were there until the audience came in and recognised them.
But I'd just like to make an observation, because I've seen a hell of a lot of musicals since I've been here, and I've only been here half a week so far. Mm-hmm. But there have been several musicals this year which have been episodic in nature. I don't mean that as a negative thing, but what people often forget is that it's the audience who gives it the binding, if you like.
Yeah, sure.
And it sounds to me you've just said exactly the same thing in a way. But I'm not saying it's the audience that have made the coalescing, but they, if you like, are the unifying factor from beginning to end. So they are piecing it together for you.
Definitely. But I think that's what we like now as a modern thing. You think about interest in television that all works on episodes and having episodes of things, and actually people really like that. They like seeing something, having to wait until you can see what happens next. Somehow that's an appeal to something.
It's an accepted form now, isn't it?
Yeah, an accepted form, and I think
the linked vignette.
Yeah, I think it's an accepted, also in a really enjoyable form, and I think especially in television you see that. But yeah, I think it is. I mean, if you can get it to work, suddenly it becomes so much more than some of its parts. I think that's sort of the secret to the episode thing. Suddenly, when it does come together, it becomes much more than that.
What do you think about the score? Now, the score is quite poppy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you said to me it was originally written in the 70s, because funny enough, I've actually written one of my notes here. This sounds like a 70s pop song. I actually wrote that against it. But the other influence I was getting, and this is very strange, more in the music than the lyrics, was every now and then I kept thinking, he'll hate me for saying this, but I'm getting Stephen Sondheim.
Yeah.
Not because it's Sondheim-esque, but every now and then there were chord sequences, or there was just enough resonance with a Stephen Sondheim to see that there was that's in there somewhere.
Yeah,
Is that
sure.
something you've picked up, or how would you see
I think
it?
now you mention it, I suppose there is an element of that. I mean, I don't really... I'm not very good. It's very hard when you're directing a musical to make the links for the musicals. I get very sort of tunnel vision. You just listen to the song and you pick out of it. But I think, and now you say that, I can see why that would be the case. I think that I love the score for this show. I remember speaking to Chris Grady, and he thinks it's one of the best scores that's been written for musical. I mean, he absolutely loves it. But I know he's a great fan of Mulvey and Shire's work. But no, I really like it. I think
When
it
you say
adds
he's
so
a big
much.
fan, he's a fan of Big, surely.
Oh yeah, and that as well. Yeah.
Ooh, clever word.
Oh, that's very impressive. That's very impressive. Yeah.
But you were saying, sorry.
I know. I think it's a great score, and we all. I mean, what I love about it, the cast really enjoy it. You know, even if they're singing around the flat, they go around singing bits of the show. Normally, the bits that aren't theirs that they think they can do better than the person who is doing it. But
no
that's
needle,
great.
no needle.
Oh no, it's fine. But they really enjoy it, and I think it gives you. It's funny. I think from the outside, you have to work at it, but as soon as you unlock it, there's so much there. And actually, been funny. The scenes have been really hard to rehearse in this show. Really, really tough scenes to get your teeth into. And the line between them working and not working, I think it's because they're written very well as very everyday. It sounds very natural. But when you start rehearsing that, you almost can't get it right. And it's only until you start getting into the rehearsals, a few weeks in, it starts to, read more naturally. Suddenly the scenes make so much more sense. So I think even I think the scores are great, but I think for a musical, I think the scenes are fantastic. And I think normally in musicals, scenes are where something is lost. We wait for a song,
of course.
And I think Baby's fantastic in that way. Is that they're not easy scenes to do, but when you do get them right, they really give you so much in return. So yeah.
I think you've been very successful. But from my point of view, I think it's. I'll be honest. As I say, I went in wanting to see it, but not it wouldn't be necessarily the first thing I'd see.
Sure.
And I came out of it thinking that is a great musical.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to give you 5 stars for that, if that's any
amazing.
useful.
That would be very
I know
useful.
You've had some already, haven't you?
We haven't any 5 stars yet. No, we've actually been. We've still been waiting for views to come through. We've had people come see it. Some haven't been published, so we're. But I mean that would obviously help us out. So that's great.
Genuinely, then I'm very happy to give you 5 stars.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
If you can find some use for that,
I'm sure you can find a lot of use for that. Yeah.
As I say, I shall now go away and probably try and find if there's any recordings of it anywhere.
Yeah.
Because I enjoyed it, and it just was. It was a closed book to me in all possible senses, and now you've opened it, so thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming to see it. It's a pleasure.
How can other people come and see it?
How can other people come and see it? Well, they can come to George Square. It's on at 7:30 in George 2. Lots of great musicals on at George 2. So definitely worth coming down to the venue. But yes, we're on at 7:30, and either call the Fringe box office or come to George Square itself.
And when does it run to?
We're going all the way to the 31st of August. So we've got the long haul. And I think there's one day off in between now and then, so we shall enjoy that one day. But otherwise, we're on every night.
Matthew, as always, it's a great pleasure. I hope this won't be the last time. I'm
sure
almost
it
entirely
won't.
certain it won't be. And if nothing else, I'll see you here again next year.
No, exactly.
But it's a great show. You've done a great job, and your cast and your orchestra are fantastic as well.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Great pleasure.
Musical Talk Twitter review.
I've got Baby next, which was, I tweeted, lovely book, charming songs, cast of variable vocal quality, but the enthusiasm and warmth shines through. It's definitely a great show, which I hadn't seen before. Again, no particular reason I should like it, because I'm not in that situation myself, but I connected to it a lot, particularly the couple.
And once again, I saw this show, but I saw it at a different time to you, and once again, I went in not knowing what to expect, not thinking it was going to be the kind of show I wanted to see, but I was completely won over by it. It was, even though it's an entirely alien world about people looking for children and living in America and things like that, I actually found that there was enough humanity in it for me to be really engaged. I liked the performances, I liked the arc of the episodic storyline, and I liked the songs, bizarrely.
It's one of those. It's one of many examples this year of music, and indeed every year, of musicals that are sort of focused on a few different couples. Like Three Couples, there was Tomorrow Morning by Lawrence Mark Wythe, and Three Sides by Grant Olding, which was a sort of three-way love triangle, and of course all of them probably go back to the last 5 years by Jason Robert Brown. So about which more later.
A 5-star show. Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Fringe.
I'm here at George Square again, this time with Andrew Panton from the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, who is the director on, is it all three of the shows that you've got here?
I'm director for Rocket Science and for Jerry Springer the Opera.
Which is the second time, well no, is it the second time that we've seen it on these shores, Jerry Springer?
Jerry Springer had its life. It started at Battersea Arts Centre, and then it did a fairly produced workshop production at the Edinburgh Festival, and then went on to the National in 2003. So it's a sort of homecoming for this piece, actually, which is quite nice. It feels like it's come home, I think.
Yes, exactly. But I should know all that because I interviewed Richard Thomas a few episodes ago about the process. But so your production, does it sort of is it different to the one we would have seen? Well, presumably different in certain ways to the one we would have seen at the Cambridge, but.
I have no idea because I haven't seen the production at the Cambridge or the DVD. So other people have compared the two, and I've been interested to hear it. So I can't really comment on the original production.
What's your approach been?
Our approach is to be, because brilliantly they don't give you any stage directions. They give you the text, they give you the fabulous music, and they let you get on with it. And so, in the same way as I suppose you would approach an opera. You do it and you take what's there, and that's what we've done. And we've had a fantastic creative team. Myself, Sally Rapier, the associate director, David Hyam, the musical supervisor, and our whole design team have been fantastic. And we've just taken it. It was a very collaborative process. We've got a brilliant cast who have all been very, very vocal in their thoughts. And of course, this kind of piece, no one is numb to it or has a sitting on the fence approach. Everyone has an opinion, which is what the piece is all about. So that makes for a fairly interesting rehearsal period and a dynamic one, as you can imagine.
Yeah. So, tell us a bit about that then, because that sounds like kind of, different people. Has anybody been uncomfortable with the material at all? I mean, I'm not asking you to name names, but was it an issue in the rehearsal room?
I think it was never an issue in the rehearsal room. When we first talked about the piece, some people were reticent about the material. Some people were reticent about whether it would work in Edinburgh, whether it would be work done by students, and whether it should be a piece done by Royal Scottish Academy. So there was lots of discussing before we actually made the final decision. By the time we got to the rehearsal room, everyone had done their research, and they came with points of view, but everyone came into the room going, this could be quite fantastic. Yeah.
And of course, as ever with this particular piece, it was accompanied by the obligatory protests outside the theatre. Not particularly impressive. They didn't do anything terribly impressive this time, I gather.
Well, do you know what?
It's
been a little bit lacklustre. We've had two lovely protesters with laminates up till now, but today they really pulled out the stops. They must have known that we had a photo shoot. I don't know if they did or not, but there was about 30 or so protesters, and the Scotsmen were in and so were the Guardians, so it all happened at the same time. But they've been quite calm, and we sold about 20 tickets tonight just on the back of the protesters passing out leaflets, so I'm not sure it had exactly the reaction that they wanted. But I tell you what we did, if there's any protesters listening, thank you very much for turning out, and we did get one of your flyers into the show tonight by one of the characters, and we contextualised your work.
There we go, that's great to know, and it's great that all kinds of groups can come and just sort of interact with the official programme and in an improvisatory way.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the other pieces that you've got here as well. The First Lady Suite, Michael John Lacusa, is I suppose I'm inclined to say it's sort of less known as an accessible type of musical than Jerry Springer. Tell us a little bit about the piece itself.
I like your context of Jerry Springer's accessible. I love that. First Lady.
Michael John Lacusa is less accessible. That's what I'm saying.
Good point. Well made. First Lady Suite. Well, Michael John Lacusa's well known for. I suppose in his own way reinventing the genre. It's a beautiful, through-sung, musically complex and dramatically very, very interesting piece. You could call it a song cycle, you could call it a through-sung piece of work. I don't know what category, everyone's going to have their own opinion on that. But it's a bit of a look behind the scenes of what may or may not have happened at the White House. It's some of it's based on fact and historical events, and then it's surmising behind the scenes. And it keys into some of the First Ladies, and it keys into some of their aides, some of their assistants, and what might have been happening at the time. Which sounds really heavy, but it's not. There's very poignant moments, and there's also hysterical moments. It's a really, really beautiful piece of work.
Which first, because Jackie O, obviously, there's a famous scene, I think, where she has some kind of vision, that kind of looks ahead to the assassination.
There's that scene.
But others?
Yeah, Mamie Eisenhower. And we actually have brought it right up to date. The final, I don't know if I should say this, the director Sally Rapier might kill me for this, but the final, she's done a lovely job. The final image in the show is of the Obamas. Just an image, it's not written, it's just a visual image. But it brings it right up to date. And I suppose what it does say is that people may change, politics may change, environments may change, societies may change, but what actually happens in terms of the running of the states is fairly consistent.
Okay, that's very interesting to know. And finally, we have Rocket Science, which is a world premiere. It's based on an HBO movie, which was, I think, last year, which I think had a limited theatrical release here, actually, as well, for a little while. Is it in... going to be seen in New York soon. I don't know if it's this production, but another production soon, I gather.
We very much hope it may be seen in New York. I mean, this is very much a work in progress. We're the first stage in development for this piece, and so what we're presenting is, I suppose, a little bit more than a workshop and a little bit less than a full production. And we've done a lot of dramaturgical work with the writers who are actually flying in from the States next week to see our production. So we would hope that this will go on, and it could be an off-Broadway show. I think it could be. It's a lovely piece. It's a story that needs to be told, and it's a story that we can all relate to in terms of high school, but it's not the High School Musical take. It's a little bit more realistic take on what it really means to be a high school.
We're very much not all in this together, I think it's fair to say.
It's very much, we're not all in this together, and Hal Hefner's very much, the central character Hal Hefner is very much on his own, and it's sort of his story, but a story that we all can relate to. It's the anti-hero. He doesn't get the girl, he doesn't get what he wants, but in some small kind of way he changes.
We're sort of in the world of Napoleon Dynamite a little bit here, and in that sort of genre. So I mean, his basic problem is that he's a stammerer, isn't he? Fundamentally, with some other sort of educational difficulties as well, and he's in a class of other people with educational difficulties, and he goes into a debating society. Just for those who aren't familiar with the plot.
He does. He gets elected by Jenny to be in the class debate society. She has her own motives for this that we find out later. But through this process of doing it, I suppose, for her, because he obviously loves her, or he thinks he does anyway, he finds himself and decides actually she's probably not the one for him.
Yeah, exactly. So that's very interesting. This has been a developmental process. So I mean, is that something that you're sort of dramaturgically involved with?
Very much so. Again, myself and the cast, actually, we're all involved in taking the fabulous material that the writers hadn't really seen up on its feet or working, and we shaped it into a 90-minute... I call it a presentation of the work, and they're developing it into a full 2-act piece. So again, we're really happy with this stage, and we'd love to be involved in the next stage of development for the piece.
Excellent. Okay, so that's brilliant, Andrew. Thank you for telling us about these three things, and as you're listening to this on Tuesday, you will still have a chance to see Jerry Springer the Opera, which is running until the 30th of August. That's at George Square 1. The First Lady Suite is at George...
They're all in George 1, yeah.
They're all in George 1.
Yeah.
So the First Lady Suite is at George Square 1 until the 28th of August. Yep, okay, until the 28th of August. Yeah. And Rocket Science will be... there are a few performances, more developmental, so it's kind of slightly fewer performances, but they end on the 24th of August.
27th, in fact.
I do beg your pardon. On the 27th of August, also at George 1. That's book by Patricia Cotter, music by Stephen Weiner.
Yeah.
We had to get that right. Could get in trouble otherwise. So, Andrew, thank you.
Lyrics by Jason Ryan.
Oh, sorry, yes, and lyrics by Jason Ryan. That's right. Thank you very much, Andrew. That's brilliant to hear. So, and just one other thing. So, a lot of the cast here obviously come from Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama. So, just tell us a little bit about what you do there.
I'm associate head of performance for the RSAMD, and I look after the MA and the BA in musical theatre. We've got the two programmes running. The BA is actually starting this September. It's going to be the first of its kind in the UK, in that they'll be studying acting, singing, dance and an instrument as well. So we're looking at more of an American model with that. The MA's been running successfully now for 6 years, and what we do focus on, which may be slightly different to other programmes and drama schools, is that we do nurture the individual artist and look for a little bit more of the creative voice from them. And so this kind of work is very much, whether it's new work, whether it's kind of a little bit different work, or whether it's really provocative work, it's work that they can all have a voice for and have a creative role in.
That's good, thank you. And it produces extremely excellent performers, and I saw this afternoon in Rocket Science. We'll be doing reviews, hopefully, of all of these shows on our Twitter feed, which you can catch. You can already see the Rocket Science one up by the time you hear this, and possibly also for First Lady Suite and for Jerry Springer as well. Thank you very much, Andrew Panton.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Musical Talk Twitter review.
We saw Rocket Science at George Square 1, one of the main productions in the main musical theatre venue. Rocket Science is produced by the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama. In fact, I interviewed Andrew Panton, who was directing on it, and it's written by American writers, and it feels very like an American show. It's based on an HBO movie that had a limited theatrical release out here, and it's the story of a boy who has a dreadful stammer, and it has to go to special ed classes, and his battle to win a debating competition. Well, alongside the girl that he wants as well. And it is, in many ways, an unsentimental sort of story, although I thought, unfortunately, it got kind of re-sentimentalised in the process of transformation into a musical. And although it was a brilliant production, really good props, casts, staging, everything really.
It was smooth and shiny.
It was very smooth and shiny, and I was a little bit... It didn't necessarily go to the places that some other rawer productions can sometimes reach emotionally.
Well, let's put it slightly more bluntly. It looked beautiful. I didn't care.
It was a slightly glibly written show, which I think it's going to the New York Musical Theatre Festival, and it will fit in like everything.
But
like,
the central character, the chap with the stammer who has to fight, unfortunately doesn't have much more character than having a stammer. He has a bit of backstory with his parents, but that's not really him.
Another episode, perhaps with Matt Fraser, to be done on again, sort of the treatment of disabilities in musical theatre, because I've never seen it done well, or very seldom anyway.
It was essentially snap out of it.
Yes, basically.
It's Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Fringe.
I'm Naomi Lawrence, and I'm the director of Pirates of Penzance.
Splendid. Now, I'm going to ask you the obvious question.
Yeah.
Why Gilbert and Sullivan, first of all?
Well, I'm in the Edinburgh Uni Savoy Opera Group, so it's
a no-brainer,
obviously,
isn't it?
the kind of the thing we do. Although I only joined this year and never had a clue about Gilbert and Sullivan before this year.
You didn't listen to them before you?
I knew nothing at all. I was a complete novice, and then we did The Sorcerer in November.
An unusual piece to do as well.
And then we decided to do a show just for the Fringe and wanted to do it for the Sick Kids Hospital.
Yes.
And obviously thought Pirates of Penzance is just the obvious kind of crowd pleaser.
Very family show as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the good thing was that because I didn't know it so well, or in fact very well at all, it was quite good for me because it was almost like saying yes to any old play, not kind of saying yes to this great big, classic, which was nice.
And you've done something which I think is very interesting, and I like it very much, which is essentially you've set it in modern times. It's modern dress.
Yeah.
The references have been updated. There's a reference to our own dear Queen.
Oh, yes.
Queen Elizabeth rather than Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
And I noticed we've got, 2076 rather than the original 1940 as mentioned in the original?
Yeah, I think it was 2072 in fact, which we spent a long time trying to work out just for those sticklers. But yeah, I don't know. I think, again, just because I didn't know the musical, I wanted to do it so that I'd understand it myself, I guess, was just the first way I read it, really. And also, we tend to get a lot of older crowds particularly when we did The Sorcerer. And I was thinking it's a shame because it's such a lively, exciting musical, and I wanted to get kind of everyone involved, younger people and everyone alike, which I think we've done. We've got quite a good kind of scope in our audience, so hopefully that's helped the kind of modernising.
Funnily enough, I was actually talking to a family in the queue in front of me on the way into Augustine's, which is the venue. And it was a mother, a father, and their teenage girl.
Oh, cool.
And they said we wanted to go to a show that was for something that would have something for everybody, including our 13-year-old daughter.
Oh, brilliant! That's exactly what we were trying to do. So glad it worked.
Now, it's the problem with Edinburgh, of course, is that everything has to be condensed into one act. And although the Pirates is a relatively short GNS, what cuts did you have to make?
We didn't cut too much. Of course, we didn't do the overture just because that was a lengthy time that we didn't quite have. But there weren't too many cuts at all, really. We just made sure that the interval was in just kind of a bit of beautiful music going over the top of a scene change. Yes, exactly. But apart from that, it happened to fit sort of exactly in our time, which was pretty good. So.
And your overriding aim as director?
I think I had two, really. The first was that I wanted to make sure it was a kind of a family show for everyone to get involved in and bring out the kind of comedy in it, so that people my age and people younger could understand it and get a lot out of it. And I think the second was I've been in a lot of musicals and always been a chorus member, and found a lot of the time particularly in Gilbert and Sullivan and things like that, where there's huge amounts of chorus girls and things like that you get a bit sort of ignored and turn into the kind of ballet dancing chorus. And one of my main aims was to make sure that everyone who was just a chorus member was given their own chance to have a true character.
And have a moment as a
yeah,
group.
exactly, and have their own idea of why they were there and why they're important, and which I think we did. I think it was good. Everyone's very individual.
The thing I thought really stood out, apart from the fact it was done with vivacity, was the fact that actually you had done that thing where you'd taken each of the laugh lines, each of the jokes, and you said, why is this funny? Is it actually still funny, or is it just because we some people laugh for routine and it's practice, and it's been funny for 150 years, therefore it's funny now.
Yeah.
Yes, it is if you play it right, but you sometimes have to find new ways of doing it, and that seemed to be very strong all the way through. It's like you've taken it out of its traditional slot, you just tilted it ever so slightly, and then put it back in the box.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Did you, is it something you as a group with the
yeah,
players?
well, I think personally for me the bits that I found funny were, again, because it was my first reading of the whole thing, so I could say these bits are genuinely amusing to me and we'll work on them. And then again, we'd be going through a scene and someone would say, hey, this bit's funny, and I'd never have thought of it. And it was quite a good kind of collaborative effort, really, particularly because we funded the whole show ourselves, doing sort of car boot sales and all this kind of stuff. So it ended up a very much a group affair in terms of the funding, and then it kind of turned into that throughout rehearsals as well. So I think it's nice because we kind of combined what everyone individually found funny into this whole sort of, hopefully someone will get some of it sort of thing. I think. And
it's a good ensemble part in many ways, because the Major General is obviously the comic character, but he isn't actually in it that much, is he? So other characters have quite, the Pirate King is a significant part, Mabel is a significant part, Frederick is a significant part, and there are other, the other parts do still also have roles. Ruth has a lot to do as well. So.
Well, it's strange. There are lots of them where they sort of pop in and do something hilarious and then leave again.
Nip off again, absolutely.
I mean, Ruth and the Major General in particular. But that's always quite nice, because it seems to be a lot of the time in kind of student organisations, the same people get the same parts, and it was nice this time that we got to give everyone a chance, because there are more kind of major roles to come in and out.
Major General roles.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, tell me, the music.
Yes.
Your musical director was Tom Batten.
Tom Payton, and
I apologise for the pronunciation.
That's okay. In collaboration with Sam Cable, who also played the Major General. It was a kind of double act, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So one of your principals was also heavily involved in the music.
Yes, he wasn't involved in the auditioning though, so it wasn't biased, I promise. But Sam Cable is a bit of an absolute genius on the piano, and a very good kind of singing coach, so he was quite heavily involved as well. So.
Because I noticed that Tom was sitting next to a poor chap who was having to play the entire score on the piano.
Yes.
And that's a long, when it's just a piano,
yes.
that's a long sitting.
Very long. That's Richard Townsend, who about 2 weeks before the run said, okay, I'll do it, and has been amazing. He's worked incredibly hard and was fantastic. So.
I assume when the thing is finished, he just puts his hands into a bucket of warm water for a couple of hours.
I think so. Sleeps for about 4 days, and yeah. No, he's doing a great job. So.
But are you happy with it? Are you? I mean, it's done very well, hasn't it? I mean, it's actually, there were queues out of a door. It's been I'm so pleased, because I've never really done anything at all like this. I've never directed as such, and particularly not a Gilbert and Sullivan or a musical of any kind. So I just did not know what to expect. And I guess the name of Pirates will always bring in crowds, but we've just had such a great response, and everyone's been so positive that I'm a bit chuffed, really. I'm feeling quite good. And none of the purists. I think this is one of those myths about GNS. It was true in the 50s. There were people who wouldn't countenance any kind of change whatsoever, and used to, I'm sure you know, they used to take the scores along and sit in the audience reading along on their laps with what was going on with the doily cart on stage, which seems an amazing way of enjoying theatre, even if you're an aficionado. I mean, I like them very, very much, but I don't take the book with me.
I think that's
passing now.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I was slightly worried about at the beginning, because again, not knowing it at all until I read the script the first time, I was worried. I was thinking, is it tradition for something to happen or not? And I guess there are a lot of people in our society who have been in the society forever, and they know every GNS backwards, and I guess I was worried about that. Is it okay to kind of change things up and modernise it a bit? But actually, to be honest, everyone has been so supportive. I was worried that there would be a few less willing members, but it's been great.
I think it's got to that stage now where those of us who love GNS want it to carry on into its, well and through its second century now, and hopefully on.
forever
into
and ever.
infinity and beyond, as they say in other musicals.
Yeah, and I think that can only happen if
Reinvention.
people keep kind of challenging it and doing more stuff with it. So
What pieces of business are you most happy with?
I don't know.
There's that lovely bit at the end when Ruth, who's fully tattooed up the arms, suddenly realises, or the Major General reveals that he also has tattoos up the arms, and therefore they're made for each other.
That's a firm favourite.
Lovely piece of business.
Favourite moment there. I also really like the sighing softly with all the pirates as statues. I like that bit. That bit's quite entertaining. I'm just really pleased with all of it actually, because I just didn't know I had it in me, or that we had it in us, really. So it's been great.
As you know, I absolutely adored it, and I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was a classic, given a fresh, witty twist. And I have said to people, they really shouldn't fail to see it. But there's not that much chance now, is there? Because it's coming to its end. Are you reviving it later in the year, or is this it?
I'd certainly like to. However, in the year we have 2 other shows that the Society do, so maybe not. But if anyone wants to, sponsor us and we'll perform it a million times over, I would absolutely say yes to that. But,
where now for you and the Society? Are you going to stay directing? Do you want to perform?
I've always been a performer, and I was worried that I'd really hate directing because I'd be incredibly jealous of everyone on stage. But I've actually found that I've really enjoyed it, and my kind of jealousy is replaced by pure pride as I sit and watch everyone. So I'd definitely like to do some more. I think I might have a break because it's a stressful business, but I'd certainly like to do some more in the Society.
Do you have any idea which one you might like to have a crack at in the future, or is it
not a clue?
The door is open to all of them?
The door is definitely open. We'll see which one pops up next.
And does the Society have a website?
It does. It is, I believe, www.usog.org.
And do you want to spell USOG?
EUSOG, which is Edinburgh University Savoy Opera Group.
Makes perfect sense to me.
It does. In the end.
Thank you very much indeed for agreeing to speak to me, but thank you more for putting on a really cracking version of GNS. I think it goes to show the durability of those shows in an environment here in Edinburgh where even if you're just concentrating on musicals, there's so much to choose from. I mean, that is the oldest one I've seen. It's getting on for 150 years. We've had, in the same venue, One Touch of Venus from 1943. And, of course, there's a myriad of new musicals all going around. But GNS can still hold their own.
It
and
definitely
I can't
can.
tell you how much pleasure that gives me. So, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
A 5-star show. Musical Talk Twitter review.
Also a success, and again slightly unexpectedly for me because it was a very traditional piece, was Murder Mystery Musical, which I've described as a peppy Morecambe and Wise style groan-a-thon with a tight script and neat numbers. Excellent. And that was, as you might imagine, the conventional murder mystery sort of being satirised really in a very sort of silly way, and very much in the style of the Morecambe and Wise sort of guest plays that they used to do, where there is no character consistency, everything's a gag, and the gags just come sort of very often, lots and lots of puns, just a very silly show. Again, not trying to do anything new at all. It had an enormously strong cast, all of whom had West End pedigree, and the book writer was Sean McKenna, who wrote the book for The Lord of the Rings, also in the West End and of course in Toronto before that.
Look guys, last few minutes of the show, I know it's wet, we can't do anything about that, but if lightning does strike, you're okay, I will take the hits. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, in a moment I'm going to try and escape from the handcuffs, the chains on the ladder. I'll try and break my record, 1 hour. So I'm going to try and do this in a time of 2 minutes. If you want to see it, say yes. Everybody, let's try this again. Everybody, do you want to see it? Say yes. Okay, take a look. I'm not in a bag or a box, no hidden keys, nothing like that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll put my body through tape. Get my wrist free.
I'm John Brandt. I'm the Associate Director of Perfect Pitch Musicals.
I'm Andy Barnes, Executive Producer of Perfect Pitch.
Splendid. Now, we're coming toward... Well, we're still in the first week here at the Edinburgh Fringe, and Perfect Pitch is well advertised all over here at George Square, and is involved in the cabaret, some of the live shows which are going on between the actual musicals which are taking place. It feels like a bit of a sandwich, but it also adds to sort of the vibrancy of the place. How's Perfect Pitch evolved?
Well, I helped programmed the venue last year for the first time, and again this year with Chris Grady. And
so you've been here since the beginning.
So since the beginning, and last year we were all here, John and a few Perfect Pitch people, and we just felt that in between the shows it was a bit dead, but there was a lot of people hanging around. So we tried to set something up last year that was a bit ad hoc, and this year we thought, let's just formalise it. So we decided as Perfect Pitch to do a slot at 8:30 that just basically allowed songwriters and composers to just show their work. So not necessarily to advertise the shows they're doing up here, but as well as their other writings.
Back catalogues and
just to kind of expose themselves in the nicest possible way. And,
that is a cabaret.
and just get show some of the talent that's out there that we've been working with that a lot of people won't necessarily know. And a lot of them happen to be up in Edinburgh, so we've just been scheduling it for whoever's around.
And was it the kind of thing that people were keen to do? I mean, sometimes people are very happy to perform their own stuff, but sometimes people say, well, they're seeing it in shows, why should they? I mean, was there good take-up?
I think people are always keen to show their work. You just have to be careful not to show too much of it.
Yes.
Especially if they are doing a show, you almost don't want to give too much away, which is why I suppose we pushed them really not to do stuff from their show, or do a mixture of maybe a couple of songs from their show and then separate cabaret numbers. So yeah, I think there's always a take-up. I mean, it's a good way of gaining an audience, and it doesn't cost anything
and
for many
also,
performers.
See how well the material that you're writing goes down, both within a context that you can give it, but also just whether people like it as a song, and that's really useful, even if it is in front of half a dozen drunk people in the bar.
Well, I was actually going to talk about atmosphere, because I was here last night, actually in a different capacity. I was interviewing the director of Baby, which had just finished, nearby, and the roof was being raised on the cabaret. It sounded fantastic. It was Christopher Hamilton, I think, who was singing last night, and I know he's a performer in his own right. But it sounded as though he had them in the palm of his hand.
Chris is quite a well-known cabaret performer in his own right. So
he looked jolly comfortable when I walked past, I have to say.
And he is, and he knows how to handle the crowd, because you can't expect the crowd to be listening all the time. It just doesn't work like that. And if you want an atmosphere, then you have to just let that ride, really. And he's very experienced at he's very experienced at doing that. And then at the end, he got his cast up to do just one song, I think.
The opening number, yeah.
Now, Perfect Pitch as a concept, would you care just very briefly to explain it? Because I know some of our listeners, they will have heard the phrase, but they won't necessarily know what it means.
Well, it started off as a showcase of new musicals, where we literally just gave writers a platform to show their work. After the first couple of years, we realised that was all very well, but actually the shows still needed some work doing on them. So we then sort of set up a development network where we work with partners around the UK, training establishments, venues, independent producers, and venue owners and things like that, where we utilise resources that they can give us in kind, and with support funding from the Arts Council and various other organisations, we kind of workshop and do readings of various musicals that we think have potential to be, commercially interesting. Not necessarily on scale, but just in terms of have an audience.
It's that developmental programme which I think is so important, because I think that's been the missing link in British musical theatre for some years now.
Yeah.
If you don't have a name, you're not necessarily... It was going to be very difficult to get anywhere, but now it's starting to become easier. I was talking to Stuart Matthew Price a while ago with The Diary of Me, which of course has been picked up by Perfect Pitch a while ago.
Well, we showcased that last year, and it's now been picked up by a producer to be presented, I think, online, as opposed to necessarily on stage, but...
The blog of me,
something like that. But that's what we're here for, is to kind of... We did a little bit of development work on that before it went in the showcase. We did some script rewrites with them, and then you put it out there for people to see. So we're starting with stuff that's at its very earliest stage, but also stuff that is a little bit more finished, where we can actually just provide the platform, because now that the name Perfect Pitch is sort of getting out there, people know what it does a little bit more. Things like this help, obviously.
Was happy to do it.
So now that that's happening, people will I hope, come and see the showcase and look for product, which is the point, and hopefully get it out there a little bit.
And I think the key is also with what we do at Perfect Pitch, or Andy's set up at Perfect Pitch, is exactly that thing, that we don't just pick up product that we think is West End bound. We pick up product that we think is commercially viable or viable on a number of levels. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they see the West End as this shining beacon, and actually that why really does the West End means success. It doesn't. And actually there's plenty of regional theatres out there on a small scale, and also number one regional theatres, and there's plenty of other avenues now. There's plenty of different medias, whether that's a TV musical concept or an internet musical concept. There's lots of ways to get creative work out there, and it's not just
Well, I agree absolutely with that, because I probably, this is treason in some ways, but I actually think the West End is a bit of a monolith, really. It's lovely for what it does, but I actually find the excitement in the world is all in Fringe, to be honest. And I know that Edinburgh can be a gateway, but it's also a destination in its own right. I always come to Edinburgh because I just think if you want to know what's going to be happening, or the names for the next few years, you can see them here first.
And I think that's more true now with this venue, with the musical theatre at George Square venue, because I think, particularly in the world we work in, but I think it counts for other sort of genres as well, but we certainly feel that people are now coming here to put on a show for Edinburgh, as opposed to just looking for the next step. And I think that's a really healthy situation, because there are some shows that perhaps should only ever play Edinburgh, not because they're not necessarily good enough, but that's their audience, or that's where they're sort of destined to be, same as some should just stay on the fringe of London or wherever else. But it can also provide that pathway if there is a good buzz about it for the next step as well. But I think it's short-sighted to just look to the West End as being the holy grail, if you like, of stuff.
It's holy, but as in it's full of holes, in my view. There's so much more that can be put in there. George Square is such a great concept anyway. I'm sort of talking about that a little bit more generally as well, just because it's been running 2 years and everyone thinks it ought to have been running so many more years, and has built up its own reputation. It's been hampered a little bit this year, not the concept, it's just there's so much building work going on, isn't there? But the venues aren't quite as focused as they were, because George 2 was on the other side, near the bar, and so there was a real sense of focus. This year it's a little bit more spread across.
Yeah, but, I think that they had to be flexible because of the building work. I think once it that settles down, hopefully next year it will become more of a focused area, if you like. Albeit I think George 1 is now far more focused than it was last year.
Yes.
It did feel a little bit like a stopgap, or people were just flitting in and flitting out, whereas this year it feels like the hub, and I think that's what it should be.
Also, though, if I may say, the thing is so much more organised this year. I mean, the George Square was lovely last year, but it was that perfect, almost British thing, shall we say, of held together a little bit by sellotape.
Yeah.
I don't mean that at all in a negative way. It was fantastic, but
I don't think anyone would disagree with
that. It was delightful, but a touch ad hoc.
I think that's always, it was a big thing that was undertaken, and there were a lot of different factions in that, and there is always that point in the first time that you ever do something where it is a little ad hoc, and there's a lot of different people coming together ultimately to create one thing, but there is that thing of meshing and just getting to know each other. I think this year we built the foundations last year,
I should say,
really, and I think this year we're building on them foundations, and hopefully if it does continue, all we can do is build.
There was real critical mass though last year, so I don't want you to think that I'm being anyway negative about it. I thought it was the best place in Edinburgh last year.
And I think the ad hocness of it was its beauty, actually. There was an energy in this place. There was an energy last year in George Square that came from the fact that we were all just throwing it together and seeing what happened, really.
And I think also there is a desire to keep a specific venue for musical theatre and make it work. So last year, I think, even though the process was perhaps a little bit more random or unpredictable, there was still the same desire, and I think people have come here this year to cement that.
Yes.
And obviously Lorna, Caroline and Ruth, who work for the university here, who effectively allow this to happen, they've learned a lot from last year, and they've sat down with everybody and said, let's make sure we do it better this year, and I think they've proved that they can do that.
The air of organisation is much more profound, but it's just the concept of George Square is just great. What are its ambitions for the future?
I think,
as far as you're allowed to say,
I think a step at a time. But I would love to see a couple more spaces that allow a little bit more flexibility. I mean, we stumbled, for want of a better phrase, upon George 4 last year, which was the 275-seater. Purely because there was a gap in it. I think there's still another gap between the 83-seater and the 275-seater that perhaps needs filling. purely because I think part of the charm of Edinburgh is that you meet loads of new producers who have never produced a show before or have produced one small one somewhere, and then you've got, you know, established West End producers doing stuff, and I think we need to sort of cater for the middle ground as well of those people that are producers in their own right but don't necessarily have big pockets but want to, you know, are proud of a product that they've got and want to make it kind of happen. And I think those venues that are just perhaps slightly in the middle of those, because George 2, great though it is, you know, you need to have quite deep pockets or raise a lot of money in sponsorship or whatever to really make ends meet on a good professional standard show here.
Yeah.
It's fine if you're, you know, it's a student production and you can ask all your mates to do it and sleep on your floor for nothing. That's fine, and that's part of the charm. But I think if we're talking about musical theatre at George Square becoming a breeding ground for talent and creativity and producers as well as musicals, then I think, you know, we need a couple more venues of that sort of scale. And I think that would be my personal aim, to try and see it have that over the next 2 to 3 years.
That's a big leap as well, to go from 87. That's a 200-seat leap.
It is, yeah.
And that is a big leap, not only financially but marketing-wise and show the scale, various scales of the show. That's a big leap. So one just slotting in there, I think, would really help.
I agree with that, absolutely, funny enough, because as you say, there are the things that people don't think about, but there's amplification, which you don't need in George 2, but you do need in George 4,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and that's
another
extra,
cost.
yes, isn't it? An extra level of infrastructure and more people. And however, it's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
That's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
It's Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Fringe. And as I walked along the Royal Mile in the worst possible weather, I bumped into Jake Brunger of the Great British Soap Opera.
Hey! And who do I see on my very wet travels? I've got my thing on as well. How are you?
Wet.
Bloody miserable, isn't it?
It's horrible.
How are you finding things, Jake?
Not great.
What's it like on the streets for you?
It's fine. It's just wet, cold, and the flyers are getting wet, and people are kind of not very happy to stop and chat because they're wet.
Somebody is now using it to their advantage. They actually came up to me and said, "Wet flyer, sir."
Oh, no, not at all.
I have a pocket full of paper mache.
What are you going to see now?
I'm actually off to interview Peter Duncan.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm coming to see you again this afternoon.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I'm taking Tim this time. I won't be able to hang around a great deal afterwards, but how everything generally all right?
Yeah, we had a great show on Wednesday, Scotsman.
You got 5 stars now.
From what?
It's on the wall.
Oh, that's from you?
No. Well, there is one from me, but you've also had one from a further... I'm sure
BroadwayWorld.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're waiting for Broadway Baby.
Yeah.
We're literally...
Oh, is this Joe on the line?
No. Pippa's saying more flyers to pick up when you want them.
Well, that's the latest news.
Right, I better carry on.
Yeah, I better go as well. Lovely to see you. It's always lovely to see you.
And tell people to come if you see them on your travel. Tell people.
Don't worry. Stay in touch, Olby. It's good to see you. Stay dry.
And that was Jake from the Great British Soap Opera, which plays in Edinburgh right up until the end of the festival, so do go along. And the website can be found on the Musical Talk website, www.musicaltalk.co.uk. A 5-star show. Twitter review.
So on our second day in Edinburgh, we saw Academy of Death, which is music, lyrics and book by Jeff Page. He's a fairly newish writer. I know him actually because he's a member of Mercury Musical Developments. And his show Academy of Death was with a youth cast, and I've written here what I tweeted about it was feisty youth cast enjoy Todd-esque Grand Guignol, some ripe plot, but excellent music and good atmosphere.
I think that's fair. I mean, it's very much... I think when you say Todd-esque, you're absolutely on the button there. It's very much in thrall to Sweeney Todd. And it's a reworking of the Burke and Hare story, the Gray brothers, although not using those characters, which was actually quite refreshing. I thought the lead actor, who plays the gentleman who's corrupted by receiving dead bodies, actually teetered on the edge of madness throughout his performance. So I was very much taken by him. He looked like butter would melt in his mouth whilst murdering prostitutes.
That's the thing. Because the thing with the youth cast, isn't it? They're always going to look a little bit. Perhaps
no. He was doing that sane to madness journey. You could actually see it in his eyes. Actually,
right,
I thought there was rather more going on there than met the eye.
It was a very well rehearsed production, and I feel that to me the big deal about it was definitely the music, and a really gorgeous score, strongly, as you say, clearly influenced by the score of Sweeney Todd, and indeed other Sondheim scores. But nicely worked out. And to be honest,
love the
unlike a
plot.
lot of the other ones we've seen, uses a lot of the black notes. Doesn't happen an awful lot in contemporary musical theatre. Far too little, in my opinion.
But just to boil this down at the end, I thought once again it had a good book. There was too much in it, but actually the story arc really, really worked. It started somewhere, finished somewhere, and you were carried all the way through. I really liked the ending.
A couple of little plot developments that I found a little bit troublesome, but
there were a few weak issues.
But it was, I suppose, Grand Guignol. It was a big sort of, in a way, it was melodrama. So I suppose you have to cut it some slack for that.
But the arc was good.
Exactly.
And you get a free glass of wine. My name is Lee Freeman, the writer of Chat, the Internet Musical.
Now, Chat is a new musical, and you're the writer of it. Composer or lyricist?
Both.
Ah, no. But do you work in conjunction with somebody else?
Yes, I work in conjunction with Phil Cross.
And he's your book writer?
He's my additional book and additional lyrics writer.
Oh, right.
And he also directed Chat as well.
Now, first of all, let's talk about the actual mechanics of a working relationship. Is this the first time you've worked together? And how did you sort of come together to become a creative team?
Well, we've been friends for quite a long time, and it was my idea to say, I've got this bit of a weird idea. How do you feel about this? And we started brainstorming some ideas. It just came and went from there. I mean, it was a very much workshopped idea. It took us nearly 2 years to properly develop. And yeah, I mean, we got.
It took quite a lot of chat to get to this point.
It took quite that joke goes on.
There's nothing original about me.
And we just took it from there. Really, I wrote a few songs, and then the lyrics to go with those songs. And I mean, and we got some of the story from the songs originally anyway, and then just developed as normal shows do. And then the rest is history. We got GSA involved.
And GSA is the Guildford School of Acting.
Guildford School of Acting, yes.
And that's essentially where you were workshopping it in public, is that right?
We did a showcase which was called the First Night Showcase, which had 4 new musicals involved. One of which was my new musical, Chat, and we got a 5-people cast, which was now actually 6-people cast, involved from GSA.
Can I ask, was the 6th character, presumably the one that wasn't in it, was that the moderator?
Yes. Yeah. How did you guess that one?
I thought that character fitted in less well than the others.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's not the actress's fault.
She now we've changed it now. She opens the show now.
And it was at that showcase that Luke Shepherd,
yeah,
who of Take Note Theatre, and of course known to this programme, Musical Talk, because he's directed the Great British Soap Opera, and last year, Jet Set Go, came to see it and was much taken by it, I think.
Yeah, he really liked it, and basically we invited him through Tom Atkins, which is he involved with Chris Grady in George Square. It was all through an email with me, emailing him saying, please come and see my showcase, I would like to see what you think. And basically he just loved it, and he just took it from there and developed it with me, and then we went to Edinburgh.
But it's been in development, you were saying, and it's changed quite significantly. And I was very interested to hear you were just saying when you first did it in Guildford, for example, it had 5 principal characters. And when it was in briefly in London in a kind of reviewing capacity, it had 6 characters, a new character being an internet moderator. Where are we now? Because I believe you say it's developed and changed again.
Well, we still have the 6 characters. But originally, in the preview, the moderator or administrator, she was people didn't fully know who she was. So we moved her to opening the show with a small little monologue introducing the characters and introducing the whole chat room world. And that we felt that worked better because that lets people into the world a bit more, invites them in and makes them feel a bit more at home.
She drives the conceit.
She glues it all together. And it's amazing how just one character can change a whole show. And it really has. That character really has changed a lot.
Now the characters, well, why don't you describe for our listeners who will desperately want to come and see the show, I'm sure, and we'll say how they can do that later, but how would you describe the show yourself?
Chat the Internet Musical is, in very basic form, a musical set in an internet chat room. It tells a story of 6 characters and how they develop, and how some of them are new to the chat room, Some of them I've been chatting for 2 years. And basically, it just tells a story of how their relationships have formed, and sometimes, in this case, how they end as well.
Yes. It's also touches upon, at least in a couple of cases, their outside relationships.
Yes. For example, there's a character, we've got Darren, the character, who's a 14-year-old boy who comes online and realises that he's gay.
Comes on, comes out. It's easily done.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, basically, that's the essence of his story. And we have his mum, who's never seen, just heard, because we didn't want to have another character who's not online, because it takes away the whole magic of it. And we have Darren's mum, and she's the catalyst of him coming out, basically, as well as people online.
I thought, on a personal level, that was the most touching of the stories, funny enough.
Yeah.
Adam Barlow, who plays him, I thought was very touching. Because he's obviously not a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah.
He's a young man, but he's able to sort of play down. But he brings a great deal of, I thought, a certain amount of teenage angst to it.
Yeah.
And, there's sadness in him. And also that courageous moment later on, when he decides what he's going to do, what way he's going to jump, as it were. But has it? So it's developed further. You've tweaked the role of the invigilator.
Yeah.
How are the other characters developed?
Well, we have a character who's a celebrity, who and he goes on the chat room, which is his own fan chat room to boost his ego. And originally he didn't have much of a journey. He's a very arrogant kind of character, and now he has a bit more of a journey. He had a realization at the end about something specific, which I don't want to give away.
And he's played by Adam Pritchard, isn't he?
Adam Pritchard, yes, and who does a very good job with it. In fact, all the cast, fantastic, really.
And of course, it has to be said they're in repertory with the Great British Soap Opera, where they're playing quite different characters.
Yes.
And that's quite interesting. If you see the two shows back to back or together, you think, gosh, because he's playing Adam Pritchard, for example, is your celebrity, your American star.
Yeah.
In this, and he plays a gay soap actor in a totally different thing with a completely different set of mannerisms. So it's a great showcase for the actors, because you and Jake and Pippa are, of course, pushing them in totally different directions in your totally different shows. What does it feel like to be in tandem with another show which is quite different in feel? I mean, it's a much more comic show, isn't it? Yeah. A Great British Soap Opera, where yours is darker edged, I'd say. Is that good? Is that bad? Is it just?
It was very interesting at first. Me and Pippa, both musicians, we really support each other, and we really help each other as much. I help her with some orchestration. She helped me with some advice for vocal stuff, things like that. We help each other, and we have a very good little relationship. We developed it quite nicely. And as far as the shows go, it's very easy to compare. But at the end of the day, you have to think to yourself, they're actually completely different shows. You can't compare them. I mean, there are some similarities, whereas in soap opera, there's on-screen and off-screen characters, and in chat, there's offline and online characters. So yeah, I mean, there are similarities, and there are some not so similar things. But yeah, you have to keep that in mind throughout the whole process.
To be honest, I think it's very easy to make the separation. It is only a superficial set of similarities. And I would say they were very, very different kettles of fish. How did you approach the score? Because obviously here on Musical Talk we're very interested in musicals as a concept overall. Yeah. But the actual creation of music, how does your collaboration work?
Music always comes first with me. Always, yeah. I don't know why, it's just it's a natural thing to me. I just sit down on the piano, I think about the themes of the show, the concept. For example, in chat, I thought to myself, it's all computers. And it's all, so I've used a lot of very high little ding in the piano and lots of that. And I wanted it to be quite modern music as well, because the internet's quite a modern aspect in our lives. So I started with that, and then it just developed into the songs that happen now. It's all about little ideas that plant in my head, and suddenly it just happens.
and you write the lyrics as well. Do you do them at the same time? Do you fuse them together, or do you find you've written a melody and then you want to tweak it as you add lyrics?
Yeah, that changes. For some songs it comes naturally. For one of the songs in chat, I Like It, that came quite quickly because it's all very listy, and I find listy lyrics quite easy to write.
It's a sort of patter song kind of
thing. Yeah. It's about the kind of song really, and it depends how much depth the song has as well. And it's what it's all about, really, for me.
And your collaboration with Phil?
Phil, basically, I wrote all the songs, all the lyrics, and all the book. And I passed over to Phil and said, tweak it as much as you like, see what you get with, and see what happens. And then we took it back to me. And we've had about 10 copies of the script in the last.
So it's past the parcel, almost.
Yeah.
Oh, how about that? Now that's a very interesting way of collaborating. 'Cause I don't think that's a very traditional way of doing it.
Not at all, but it just seems to work with us. We've had about 10 scripts in the last 4 months.
Oh, right, so it has been.
It's been really.
Yeah.
I mean, because he's been working and I've been working as well, so we've had to do it by
real
email.
life does tend to get in the way somewhat.
Yes, it does a little bit, yeah. And I mean, it's just through emails, through conversations, through meeting up and having a coffee and just having to go through the script, things like that. It's a teamwork thing as well.
What have you learned from it from a personal level as a creator, a composer, a writer?
I've learnt to have patience, especially with singers, because it's very easy to say, oh, just do this, it's fine, but physically it's not possible to do. And sometimes I don't think about that, and I've learnt much more to think about, would a singer be able to do this? And what kind of singer am I looking for here? Things like that, really, little things like that.
The ability to temper your creativity to match the ranges that you know you're going to have, in a way.
Exactly.
That's quite difficult, composing within limits.
Exactly. It was interesting because the administrating character, Mary, who's played by Sophia Ben, that was pretty much written with her in mind.
Oh, right.
Because that part wasn't originally sung, but we just loved her voice in the audition. Me and Phil decided we had to write a song for her, and we made her part quite central, actually.
Yes. Well, as you say, it's now a principal narrative device.
Yeah.
These things can happen almost any time. I don't know if you had a chance to see Showstopper, the improvised musical, which is fantastic.
Hilarious.
But they started here last year in Edinburgh. And Dylan Emery, the gentleman who's he plays the storyteller, says that conceit wasn't created until 20 minutes before the first performance.
Really?
They had no idea, but they needed somebody to do a kind of overarching narrative thing. So, and that's now the central linchpin of the whole process. So it's exactly, sounds very similar to your situation.
Yes, it was.
But actually, a late arrival actually is the thing that cements the whole process together.
It's incredible. It really changes everything.
How's it going? I suppose that's the next question I have to ask. Because you're in George II, which is the famous, well, how would one describe it? Generously, a couple of ships container stapled together in a back garden.
You know what? I mean, before I came, Luke was telling me it's tiny, don't get too excited. But I walked in and I fell in love with it.
It's a good space.
It's a lovely space. It's really nice. I think it's very spacious.
There's a very similar, if you go to the Pleasance, the Edinburgh Pleasance, there's one of the venues there is called the Beside. Almost exactly the same setup, has almost exactly the same atmosphere. It's really good for intimate musicals.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the right size. You get about 70 people in,
Fringe.
don't you? Yes. Now, have you a vast experience of coming to Edinburgh in the past? Obviously, this is presumably your first time as a creator.
This is my first time as a creator and performer. I've come up about 3 years ago helping on marketing as a little flyer boy, making some contacts and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I knew what the festival was all about. I knew how it worked. And I've always, from the very beginning of Chat, I've always known it can't be longer than an hour and 15 minutes.
Yes.
So I would say, if it's longer than that, it has to be a special show.
Quite. It starts feeling different, doesn't it?
Yeah. It gets a bit too much in Edinburgh. But yeah, I mean, I love Edinburgh. It's been a dream to take Chat to Edinburgh from when I started writing it. I've always had it in my mind. So it's a great achievement for me.
And where do you want it to go next? Do you have an idea where it's going?
There's a possibility of going to London with Take Note. Possibility. I mean, there's some Amjams are interested, which is great. But I don't know. I mean, as far as writing goes, I'm not sure if it's wise to do anymore. I think I'm all chatted out.
Yeah. Well, there is a danger, isn't there? Some composers write one show and then spend the rest of their lives rewriting it. They just draw a line and start a new one.
Exactly. You don't want to go over the top because it could ruin the show.
Absolutely.
Me and Phil have always decided to not try and make it any longer just for the sake of making it any longer, because if we do that, we could ruin the show. I mean, there was a song that we cut. It was just, if we kept it in just to make it longer, it wouldn't have made much sense. So.
Well, as you say, if you're just expanding it for the sake of a time slot, then you're not doing it for the integrity of the piece, and that's got to be the first.
That is the absolute first consideration. Yeah.
Now, future projects.
Future projects. Up in the air. I'm dying.
It's a great name for a show, but that's not what you're talking about.
That'd be good, actually. It's a good name. I don't know. I definitely 100% want to still writing musical theatre. I've had a few people pitch ideas to me, which I'm quite fussy with my ideas and my writing. I need something that really triggers my imagination off. And at the moment I haven't found that, but definitely I'm definitely going to be writing in the future. Hopefully, I would love to be involved with techno theatre still.
It's funny you should say that, because just to look at, the granddaddy of all British musical theatre, W.S. Gilbert, had exactly the same problem. He just couldn't write to order. He had to wait for inspiration to fall in his lap. Sometimes quite literally with the Mikado. I don't know if you know the story about that.
Yeah.
One. Yes, the samurai sword landing on his desk. So you should sit next to some ornamental iron.
I might give that a go. I think see, might spark up some inspiration.
150 years later, the same method still works.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But definitely I'm going to be writing some more. There's still more in me.
I'm very pleased to hear it. Lee, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you very much.
Theatre really comes alive, and practical theatre never fails with a Canterbury Tales, The banter and the free booze, the mood, the crowd, the vibes, the sex it really isn't real, it's just implied,
I certainly shall. Thank you.
5:15 today, 2 for 1 with a flyer.
Is it a musical?
It's not really, no.
It has music in it, though.
It's got a bit of play again.
Yeah, lovely. It sounds very enjoyable. It's down at C2, isn't it?
No, Space
right.
45.
Oh, right, I do apologise.
Yes, it's a bit of a source one. It's enjoyable.
Splendid.
It's a rewritten version, so.
Yes, it's a new translation. I saw it advertised when I was at C2 yesterday for Merrily, so I was actually faintly interested, so I'll keep the flyer. Thanks very much indeed.
I said
Thanks.
2
Nice singing, by the way, as well. Free glass of wine, right.
Yes, free glass of wine, definitely.
Thank you. See you again.
It's musical talk at the Edinburgh Fringe. Musical Talk Twitter review.
So we then popped off to see Ed, the musical, which was at Sea Soco, and I have to complain a little bit here because with the sea venues, it took us so long to get into it that I'm afraid we had to leave before the end, although I have actually seen a staging of this before, so I do know how it ends. This is by Michael Bruce, who, as I've said before, is considered very hot property at the moment and is indeed being showcased at the Apollo in Shaftesbury Avenue later on this year. Ed the Musical is the story of an author, a children's author, who falls in love with a lady who runs a bookshop, and unfortunately, when he's about, we think, to propose to her, and the story is told slightly out of sequence, so you get to know this at the beginning, he manages to electrocute himself thanks to a melted ice sculpture putting water on the floor at a party. Slightly contrived, but there he is suddenly in a coma, and that gives us our second part of the story, which is a rock star who effectively is drinking himself to death. I'm not sure really, other than the plot, how those two stories connected together and what we were supposed to kind of learn from them in relation to each other. The songs, of course, were excellent by Michael Bruce. They were extremely well crafted. They were retro as well, I would say, and a lot of them were, again, sort of stand-alone cabaret numbers, and I'm not sure entirely that the whole thing justified those specific numbers. There's a number about champagne, for example, which is a brilliant standalone piece. Don't know why it appeared in that particular plot. So it wasn't necessarily the most important thing about the drama that was going on at that time. But that was Ed. Probably more development in the pipeline for that, I would assume, and certainly more music was coming from Michael Bruce, who is an enormously gifted composer, lyricist.
It's Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Fringe.
My name is Donald Hawkins, and the name of the show is Brel at Breakfast.
Now, Jacques Brel, big name on the continent, less popular here in Britain, although known by there is a full sector of society who knows him. Tell us a little about your show and a little about Jacques Brel, because some of our listeners won't know really his importance.
I think probably quite a lot of them won't. In fact, to my eternal shame, I didn't know who he was until I was having French lessons. Well, I was learning French via the UK Open University whilst working in Amsterdam, where I have a translation business. So I was in Amsterdam learning French, and my French teacher gave me a Jacques Brel CD and said, "You ought to listen to this." And I said, "What? Who?" I'm English. I never heard of him, because English the English and the Americans, they have a different pop culture and they don't seem to know.
We don't have chansonnier.
We don't have chansonnier, and they don't know anything about it. And I didn't. And this was sort of like 10 years ago. And the man had already been dead 25 years or something. and I didn't know who he was. But I listened to his CD, and although I couldn't understand the French, it was still too difficult for me. I was just learning the language. It went straight to my soul. There is a quality, of course, about his voice and about his presence when he's performing, even through a CD, and you couldn't even see him. I've seen some films of him since then, apparently on the stage as well. It was absolutely magic. And what the French chanson tradition does, and which he was the master of, although he was Belgian,
Yes.
Born in 1929 in Brussels, Francophone Belgian, is it deals with the main themes of life: love, loss, politics, death, and it talks about them. And of course, French songs have many, many words often, as the ones I've sung this morning do. So it explores emotions and talks about them and communicates in a completely different way to the boom bang bang and the endless repetition of UK pop. So that somehow got to me as soon as I heard the CD, and I thought, wow. And I don't know why. I played the piano a bit, but not good enough to perform. I thought, I have to learn to sing. And I'm not going to tell you how old I already was then, but I was already very old. And so I started having singing lessons. It took me 5 years to learn how to sing, and since then I've been learning to perform.
If you don't mind me saying, I think Breakfast with Braille is a delightful show already. But I think it's fascinating. I applaud your enthusiasm for someone who was learning French and then decided to learn to sing. That's real dedication to your material, if I may say. And I think you're right. I mean, Jacques Brel really is I think you put it very well. It's all an encapsulated emotion. Each song touches on something which actually are real feelings, where pop is so often synthetic feelings. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think pop has touched upon love in a real, meaningful way for many, many years, if it ever did. Yeah. Whereas you can tell immediately, and it's a fusion of the music and lyrics. Now, you translate some of them into English, and you sing some of them in French.
Yep.
What's your reason for that?
Because I'm in the UK. I discovered
a good answer.
As I said, I have this translation business in Amsterdam. So it's quite a good start. It means that if I need any help with translations, I can find it. It's my job. When I sing in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands, and when I sing in France, which has been a few times now, but not very often, compared with 25 shows, one day after another each day in this Fringe, I sing in French. I sing this stuff in French, and when I sing English songs, originally English songs, originally Dutch songs, or originally German songs, which I do as well. I'm going to sing Schubert and Fauré as well. I mean, I'm having singing lessons, so I learn the whole thing. But this is where my heart is, of course. I'm not doing Die Winterreise this year. Maybe next year. Mark Wyman, the brilliant pianist, the tango pianist, and not only tango, he's already doing arrangements for Schubert for me, special arrangements. So maybe we could do that next time. Anyway, I'm getting off the subject. So when I sing these songs, these chansons, I sing them in French on the continent. The French love it. The French that know how well Jacques Brel sang, and they know that I can't sing exactly like him. I said at the beginning, it's not a tribute act. It's not trying to impersonate anybody.
It's interpretation.
Yeah, but they love it. And in Amsterdam, they're a pretty laid-back crowd, but they're pretty enthusiastic too. In French, and so there wouldn't be any reason to do anything else, except that we're in an Anglophone country. I was told that 80% of the audience would probably be Scottish, despite all the tourists that are here. And I thought, you can't do that to them, because I want to communicate some of the meaning, what the words actually mean, not just the raw emotion, which I can do, even when singing in French. So that was the compromise. I decided we'll translate some of them and see how it works.
I thought that worked very well, actually, if you don't mind me saying. And I think you're right to open the first number with a very, very meaningful song, and in English, because I think that sort of set the scene for the rest of the show. People realised that it was going to be a show that was, you said soul. That's exactly, it went straight to your soul, and I think that's what you were doing with the rest of it, sort of touching our soul. And then you went straight into the upbeat, the second number, which was in French.
Madeleine in French,
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely, but it's a rather different tone, isn't it? It's much more vibrant and joyous.
Exactly.
And so we were suddenly shown, look, here's a range of things, and it's going to be in different languages, but it's not going to be difficult. It's not going to be inaccessible. So I think you
I
pitched
hope
that
not.
very well at the beginning, actually, to be honest.
Thank you.
You've translated some of the songs yourself, and I heard you saying earlier that you've been... one or two newspapers have taken umbrage at this, although I think it was excellent. I think to keep if you pickle these things in aspic, they actually die, whereas if you keep bringing them alive with new translations, new orchestrations, new delivery, then you're helping to reintroduce them and re-engage
I think
them.
great material from any composer or songwriter can carry that because it carries so much inside it. It's got so much to say that it requires interpretation and reinterpretation for new times, and can cope with it. The 9 Day Wonders, which have just got one little idea, perhaps can't, but we're not talking about that sort of thing.
So, and you said Jacques Brel has a sort of catalogue of 120 songs, and you have 55 minutes. Now that's quite an editing task. How exactly did you come down to those?
In this show, I don't even sing only Jacques Brel.
Yes, you introduced a few others.
I could have.
You do a fantastically wonderful, I think that's the best way of describing it, version of a Living Doll, which is of course by Lionel Bart originally, I think.
Lionel Bart's song, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Wim Feenhoff, who announces it, he didn't realise that, and he thought it's Cliff Richard's song. Of course, Cliff Richard did it, and he also did it with the young ones. And I must admit, we're a little bit inspired by that version.
Well, it's great. It's also a lovely little punctuation in the show, as it were.
Well, that's what we thought. We thought, what are we doing? Are we doing a tribute show? No. Are we doing a show to try and show Jacques Brel's life? No. That would have been a possibility, except you need an actor then, which I'm not. There is somebody in Holland that does that, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Does it all in Dutch. So that probably wouldn't be very accessible either.
Not quite for the Fringe, that one.
Jeroen Willemse he's called. He's very successful with it. So what we decided we wanted to do, and when I say we, I mean myself and the two pianists that play, Wim Feenhoff and Mark Wyman, but also Lucas de Man, who is a Belgian director. Belgian, quite appropriate. Of course knows Brel extremely well. And we decided that what we wanted to do was show Donald, because this is actually quite unusual. I nearly said interesting, but I don't want to say that about myself. But
I'm happy to say it is interesting.
Because here's this old guy who decided to learn to sing because of being inspired by Jacques Brel. Now, that was a bit of a gamble whether it would pay off or not. There are people that think I don't sing very well. Some people love it. Okay, it's a matter of opinion. But I decided to do this because of the passion I felt when I heard Jacques Brel, and then other things. And now, this is the great thing, he's a wonderful poet, and now I can feel passion when I learn a new Schubert song. And I wasn't interested in culture before. I was not interested in culture and poetry and all that stuff that we had to do at school. I just ignored it. And now, I know I get poetry. You know?
He's opened doors for you in a whole different range.
It's amazing. So it's this enthusiasm and this passion, and all the things that have happened to me, and the sadnesses and the loneliness and the beautiful things that we wanted to express, and we picked the songs that are representative of how this process works in me. So really it's the story of Donald's very egocentric. My last show in Amsterdam was actually called Egoismus, which is a German word for...
I can see the development there.
So it's a show about me, and since I have all the emotions and so on, and the fear of death and everything that goes on around that, life and love and loss is a big one for me. And we picked the songs that we do it, as you say, from a couple of different composers, and indeed one very special one for me because of what I've experienced in my life, from Edith Piaf, and of course punctuated by things which didn't have to be those particular songs, but you've got to have a few moments of light relief, but I think that works.
I also just want to touch on briefly, if I may, the splendid arrangements. Your accompanists are great. They work splendidly in tandem and apart. But also the tone of it. There's an electronic sense to the music to a degree.
Yep.
And actually, I think that's really... How should I say it? I think that really takes it to another dimension as well. What we're not getting, and it takes you back to your earlier point, we're not getting a rehash. This is a new show, new interpretations across the board. Yep. And I think that fuses really well with your singing and their... it's difficult to explain, but I was really taken by the fact they aren't just pianos. They're pianos with electronic augmentation, there's a bit of sound effect, there's a kind of... some of it's being processed. That's that in that intimate venue, that really comes across as a brand new feeling almost. It's a fugue of sound, actually.
Yeah. Now, that was quite an effort to do that, and it was instigated by Mark Wyman, my American accompanist who lives and works in Amsterdam, and Wim Veenhoff, who's also who's native Dutch.
Slightly amusing as well, if I may say.
Mark instigated the idea of how we would do it, and Wim picked it up very enthusiastically. And it's actually billed as, the company's billed as Donald Hawkins and the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra on 2 laptops. And in fact, the keyboards, which are there, you can't see them, the keyboards are used to determine which notes are played and in which sequence most of the time, except for the click tracks, of course, where you've already programmed it. But the sounds are samples, including big orchestras and multiple Steinways and so on. The sounds are samples which are in a gigantic hard disk that are in the Apple Macs.
Yes.
And so that's how they do it.
And it's a really great sense. I mean, I have to say, I think it lifts and supports you in a marvellous way. You know, you are the cherry on the Bakewell tart of delight. I don't know if that's a quotation anyone might want to use, but it's what I felt. How are the audience taking it?
The audience, one guy walked out on Sunday.
Really? But everyone else stayed in, I trust.
And he said, "Don't give up the day job." What a load of shite! I never heard anything so bad in all my life, he said as he walked out.
What a nerve!
About 2/3 of the way through. But he's an exception. The audience love it. I think the audience, of course, reviewers have got to be critical. The reviews we've had so far have been positive, except for one. But the audience are really just overboard for it.
Also, you've got a difficult slot because it's in the morning, isn't it? And it's 10:30 in the morning, which is never a good time for a show. I mean, no one ever goes to the theatre at this time normally.
No,
so I think you're on an uphill track. But actually, I think you draw the audience. I think were very, very quickly won over. They're in the palm of your hand.
No, I think that went quite well today. Went extremely well yesterday as well. This is the 7th show of 25, and I hope it's getting better every day.
So how can people see it? That's the question.
They can book via the Sweet website. Sweet Entertainments is one of the venue managers, which is very well known. They can book on the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, edfringe.com website. They can call 0131 0026 0000, which is the Fringe box office telephone number. Sweet's got a phone number as well, which I've forgotten. And they can.
We'll put a link on our website to it. So that's
very
fine.
good, thank you. And they can turn up and get tickets at the Apex City Hotel, 61 Grassmarket, venue 18, at the Sweet box office in the hotel lobby. But they better do it at least 2 days before because it's selling out.
Splendid, that's excellent news. Do you have a website?
I do. What's on it is about this show, and what will be on it is about future appearances and future developments. It's a new website, so don't expect vast discographies, but I think there's links to a couple of videos and so on.
What is that website?
That is www.donaldhawkins.net.
Well, Donald, may I say I've had a wonderful morning. Thank you very much for speaking to us, and best of luck for the rest of Edinburgh.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it immensely.
Musical talk. Now, as you'll have gathered by now, George Square is a significant venue for musical theatre at the Fringe. And as we heard earlier, George Square is about developing new theatrical writing. And as a result, there was a daily masterclass about musical theatre. Tim Saward presented one of them, about how to write successfully. Others were presented by other luminaries in the musical theatre world, including Jennifer Toxvig, who we'll hear shortly, and our old friend Dylan Emery from Showstoppers, the improvised musical. Here's just a very brief introduction from his improvised musical theatre masterclass.
You're also slightly jumping into the deep end because music improv is at the slightly scarier end of the improv spectrum. It's actually not any more difficult than any other improv. It's just that if you don't commit to it fully, it's obvious because the song screws up. Whereas in normal improv, you can get away with just going, I don't know what's going on, by stepping back in the scene and just like pretending you're a bit of furniture, and you can literally not do anything in the scene, and you get away with it. It's just as bad improv, it's incredibly unhelpful for the scene, it can be just as destructive, but you can kind of get away with the audience to notice. Whereas in a song, as soon as you start going, I don't know what I'm doing, as soon as that fear creeps in, you stop singing, and then the audience goes, oh, it's screwed up. So all the only difference is that it really exposes it.
And that was Dylan Emery there from Showstoppers giving his masterclass. And of course, Showstoppers, the improvised musical, was on here in Edinburgh every day. Do go and see it. It remains one of the most professional, slickest, funniest, cleverest musical shows you'll ever see, and it's different every night. It's a 5-star show. But it's not the only improvised musical that you can find in Edinburgh. There was a totally different group of people doing a totally different style of improvised musical. The group are called No Shoes Theatre, and I was lucky enough to speak to Michael Slater, one of its luminaries.
I am Michael Slater, and I'm the director of an improvised musical by No Shoes Theatre in C Venues.
An improvised musical?
Yes.
I know it does what it says on the tin, but would you care to elaborate just a little bit for our listeners?
Okay, well, the show is completely improvised, which lots of people don't believe. I had a conversation with some people last night who said, well, you must have decided the tunes, and you just changed the words, or you must have decided who's on stage, or the scene order, or something. Like they're kind of clawing at something that we've prearranged, which we haven't, absolutely. And we've done 9 shows now, and we haven't seen the same thing twice. So basically, we take a starting location, like a gym.
This is from the audience, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And so from the audience, we take a starting location, and we take a title for the show, obviously, and we take a song that we should sing somewhere in the show. So they get to decide what happens at some point, basically. And we have to kind of work the title of the song into the story such that it doesn't completely stick out, which usually works out quite well. And then we just go for it. And we have these cards, as we call them, which are... We have a channel hop and a commercial break and a spotlight and a flashback, which the audience are allowed to hold up in the middle of the show and scream out, and they get to hear a little bit more about the character or whatever.
So that extra air of interactivity, if you like.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're like wild cards, if you like.
The whole point of improvisation, and particularly this kind of improvisation, is that the audience feel responsible for what you're doing. So if you can...
Or blame shift.
And if you give them something that they can actively interrupt the show with, then you get a laugh for the fact that they interrupted the show, and you have to kind of improvise around what's gone on. Yeah.
Now, do you see us, because you've been up to the Fringe on many occasions before, you seem to do a lot of musicals as a group.
Yes.
You've done the Full Monty, you did Tony the Blair musical, you did Sweet Charity, I think.
I directed Sweet Charity, yeah.
So this feels like a branch. It's still a musical, of course, but it feels like a branch out. How are you with improvisation? Obviously quite good, but tell me.
No, it's been really fun. Alex Wright, who's one of he's the original director, I suppose, of Belt Up, is an improvising kind of guru, I suppose. So we've had him along as well, and he's in the show, as you saw. It's been really, really fun. Like, being able to do a different show every night is fantastic. The stress that you go through when you're on stage is obviously very high, but... it's so...
The sound effects seem to be proving you right.
It's really good, isn't it? Yeah. No, really good. And we don't have to pay rights on the material.
You've been trained by an improviser to do it? Where did you get the original idea for an improvised musical? Because there are other improvised musicals.
Yes, no, it was from One Night Stand last year. I spoke to a couple of the guys, and I actually Facebook messaged one of them and said, are you coming this year? Is there going to be some kind of before we agree to do it? Is there going to be some kind of horrible competition where we both lose? And they're doing a high budget show in LA, in Hollywood.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
they're not here. Impro.
A high budget impro musical.
Better quality props.
I don't know. No, they don't have props. I'm sorry. That is something I should have said about our show. Is that we take props from the audience and we try and use them, whether or not we use them as what they actually are or whether we use them as something completely different. We try and use them, which is also another good way of getting the audience involved. It's like, oh, my shoe.
Yeah. Well, yesterday somebody's boxer shorts, clean. I'd like to hasten to add, were used as a pie.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, yeah, and it's really good. Yeah, so we weren't really trained by an improviser. Like, obviously, we've read Keith Johnston, everyone has, and we basically just workshop the whole thing, just practice, and we spent so long on songs, so long rehearsing songs, and just what rhymes with potato, go, and singing songs and singing a line, and someone else has to sing a line that rhymes, and etc. It's
I mean, you're obviously a relatively tight-knit community theatrical group anyway, but that must really bring you together because impro is all about trust.
Yeah, no, completely, and it's all about not blocking what other people have done. So we know each other so well now, and so well what people are going to do on stage that you can kind of guess and hopefully see a step ahead. And then it's when somebody comes in and messes that up that you really have to start thinking. So you're sat at the side of the stage and you're like, right, so we'll go up next and we'll do this or whatever. And then someone says something on stage and you're like, okay, No, we won't. I have no idea what we're going to do now. But we're really, it's a really tight-knit group.
Now, what I noticed yesterday, because I was watching it with a fairly tight eye, if I may say, is that one of the yesterday, without giving too much away, was about supermarket.
Yes.
And the fight of global commercialism against localism, essentially.
It's quite a big issue to deal
themes.
with.
I like that, themes. All boiled down to aubergines and ocelots, I seem to remember. But one of the characters played a kind of sort of Igor hunchback, kind of master character.
Yes.
It's a great comic effect. And what I noticed was that those of you who weren't actually in that scene appeared to be biting your fists with laughter.
Yes, no, we are, and when we're off stage, we're effectively the audience. It's nice if we don't laugh at things that they don't laugh at, but yeah, no, I think it's quite nice to see that we are also finding it funny at the back. If we were sat there with completely deadpan faces, I think the audience would be a bit like, should I be laughing at this? Is that actually funny? So yeah, no, we're completely that. I think it goes to show how improvised it is as well, because had we done all this stuff before, we probably wouldn't find it funny anymore. I think there were a couple of occasions last night when somebody laughed on stage, I think, which is
there were a couple of corpses,
not really in the rules, but you know.
But in an intimate venue like that, you can get away with that, because
Exactly.
the audience like it every now and then, as long as it doesn't become too often.
Yeah.
How do you, and this is a question to you,
okay,
improvise a song? Do you feel comfortable with it? What's your relationship with the music and the musician?
Right, I've now got to the point where I just don't think when it starts. Usually, when we did it a couple of months ago, when we were first doing performances to audiences, the Gav would just starts. Or now we have Paddy on bass and Emily on the kit as well, and any of them start and they just kind of like, oh yeah, this feels like an appropriate moment to start a song, and they'll just start playing, and you just sing. And it's only because we've practiced so much and we've done so much rhyming and we've done so, that sort of song structure, and how do you get a verse, do you put a middle eight in, are you going to sing a chorus, is everyone going to sing a chorus? It's only because we've done it so much that it works, and I just don't think about it. Yeah.
And is that is the secret, to actually just go with the flow in a very, very literal sense?
Yeah.
You said being dripped on.
Yeah, absolutely, completely. If you get the song that we're supposed to be including, you have to think very, very hard. So you sat at the side going, okay, no, I could sing this song, but what rhymes with Jemima? And you're going, I really need to get a rhyme that I can, because the best thing you can do is set up an open rhyme, kind of A B thing. So you go A B and you rhyme with what you're going to do, and then A again, then you come back and you sing the line that they've given you, and the audience go wild. Yeah, it's such a fluid thing, and just getting used to following Gav, because obviously we haven't prearranged any chord progressions. So sometimes he'll go somewhere and you're not expecting him to, and you'll go, oh, and you kind of bend back into where you're supposed to be, and then occasionally you guess exactly what he was doing, and an incredibly weird change happens, and everyone in the audience goes, they planned that.
Do you ever find yourself absolutely lost?
Oh yeah.
And what do you do? Dance routine.
Yeah, no, lost in the middle of a song is not a very nice place to be. No. We kind of know what each other look like when we're lost in a song now, and hopefully there's somebody else on stage who just comes in and feels. Yeah, sometimes you sing something, you sing something else, and then you go, I just don't know what to sing. And often it will break down into talking. You'll say, so yeah, no, that's a really good idea, or something like that. But yeah, no, it doesn't.
You can lead into a song with a bit of
exactly,
speech over
and you can speak in the. He could speak. That was another thing we got. When we first started it, as soon as Gav started playing, it was like, oh God, we've got to sing a song. Whereas now, sometimes we underscore scenes and stuff like that. It's really nice. And sometimes an underscore turns into a song, or
which adds to that air of professionalism almost, doesn't it?
Right, it's exactly what. It's exactly what a real musical does.
So to give us an idea of the kind of randomness that's come up, you've done 9 shows at the time of recording.
Yes.
Can you just give us a thumbnail sketches of 1 or 2 of the plots that have developed from nowhere?
Okay, we've done one called Musical Chairs, which was one of the least, I think, wacky titles, but it was great. We had one which started in a jungle, and it turned out that a bunch of guys who were on a bus trip into the jungle had got lost and couldn't find the bus to get back again. One of them ended up staying in the jungle, and the show was called My Other Car is a Toothbrush, and this chap ended up going completely crazy and started thinking that things were things that they weren't, and we had to trick him into coming out of the jungle by telling him that this toothbrush was his car, and he followed us out. And Get Your Walrus Off the Stage, Mrs. Worthington, was
that's the B-side to Noel Coward's song.
Yes, was really good actually. It was about a play within a play set in the Antarctic about two would-be scientists who'd gotten off the plane in the wrong place and ended up being mistaken for scientists, who were then hooked into the local Antarctic theatre project that they were currently doing, which was a play about walruses and things, and ended up being the stars of the show. And there's a great song in that one where Mike and Alex were playing seagulls, and the backing vocal, and Veronica was playing a walrus, and the backing vocals were kind of tuneful, harmonised animal noises with me singing over the top. It was really good. That sound was really good.
Your musical group, the three of them, are fantastic. Actually, I mean, it feels like jazz. Half of it. It's beautiful.
Phenomenal. Yeah, Gav is he's a music graduate of years ago, but he is a phenomenal jazz pianist, a phenomenal improvised pianist, and I mean, I'm nowhere near a good enough musician in terms. I play the French horn, but I'm nowhere near good enough for the Paddy. Following Gav is just, you see him with them, and he's just going, and Gav's busy making up these bass lines. And I think that's why people think we cheat so much, is because how could you have a musician that good? But they're amazing.
Do you find there are tropes which come up again and again, either things the audience say as a regular thing, or things you find as a group that sometimes it's difficult to get out of? Oh, this is something this is a kind of conjunction we've come to before. Let's not follow the same path, but you find you're strong. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no,
Very
yeah.
badly, right?
The audience seem to love animals in the titles. So there's always one about a badger.
Yeah.
Someone always shouts out something about a badger. We've done a show about a badger. My badger eats cheese.
It had to be cheese.
Yes.
Because cheese is the other regular thing. You see cheese everywhere.
Cheese always comes out. Badgers always come out. And obviously we pick things that are completely different. I mean, even we've never done anything the same, including rehearsals. So we don't. If someone shouts out a starting location, even if an audience hasn't seen it, if we take it, it's not going to end well. It's good. In fact, I think sometimes it's more difficult when you have done something before to do it again, because you remember what you did and you think, oh yeah, I'm going to get that brilliant rhyme I had in, and you sing the first part of it and you go, oh crap, I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember what I did, and then you're completely stuffed because your brain's not in the right place. But yeah, there are, there's love stories that occasionally look like they're going to happen, and it's like, oh no, he fell in love with her 5 nights ago. That's not good. And yeah, basically, take it somewhere else.
And presumably the same must happen with characters as well. If you're just improvising a character, it must be quite difficult to come up with something different. I mean, Igor is a lovely stock, but you don't want Igor every night.
No. The characters, actually, it's been going really well. We haven't really had 2 characters the same. What we have had the same is names, and it's really funny. You come on stage and what's your name? Emily. Ah, damn it, my name was Emily last night. And as you saw, the Jemima appeared twice in the show that we did yesterday. It's really funny that we can manage to come up with brand new characters and brand new whatever, but names not so good.
The pool is smaller.
The pool is much smaller.
If I may call you Fred.
Fred, yes.
Which was your name yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, it was quite interesting yesterday because you started in a bank, but that was actually you started with the scene about the monetary situation
needing money,
down, which led you into that corporate concept of globalism.
Yeah.
But then you didn't go back to the bank at all. You sort of sidestepped that and created a show that was entirely unrelated to that first scene.
Yes, and that doesn't happen very often actually.
Oh, right.
Now, most of the shows, most of the shows are entirely based around where we started, and we either stay there or we go away and we come back to it. I think it was quite nice to be able to go away from it. As long as you've still got an arc, as long as you've still got a big problem at the beginning that you can solve at the end, it doesn't really. It's not really necessary to necessarily go back to where you started, as long as you've resolved the problem. The horrible feeling comes when you've got 4 minutes left and you haven't resolved the major problem, or even worse, the night before you haven't got a big problem to solve, so you've got this kind of wavering story arc that doesn't arc. It kind of lulls and it's.
So what do you do in those circumstances? I mean, because you've also got a set time, haven't you? I mean, the venue in says you've got this amount of time. That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So we tend to try and keep the show kind of 5 minutes under the hour, and it usually goes over by 3 minutes, and we're happy in an hour in time. Kind of not introducing new material after halfway through is definitely something we try to stick to. Setting up problems in the first kind of 10-15 minutes and then in the middle you're kind of resolving little problems, or you're having funny gags, or and then at the end you come back to the problem you set up in the first 10 minutes.
There's one member of your team who's very keen on puns.
Oh,
rather splendidly, if I may say.
They were absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
his mushroom jokes.
You could hear clinching going on across it.
Yeah,
but delighted clinching.
Yeah, no, he's very funny. His background has been very much in panto, and he's got some hilarious gags that he comes out with. I don't know where he gets them from. And also great when the kids are in. We had 17, 18 kids in the other day, and had to do a show. I had to do a show that was obviously tailored to them. And there was one a couple of nights before that where we had some kids in, where we somehow managed to do a show that was for the kids. So they were very much enjoying it, and what was going on was fun. But the themes we dealt with were like abandonment and false pregnancy results and
the bigger issues,
the huge issues, completely over the top of this slapstick comedy show. And I think everybody enjoyed it, and it was really good.
Now, I'm going to have to say this, of course, because there is another improvised musical here in Edinburgh, down at George Square, which is Showstoppers, the improvised musical, a very well-established, very professional group.
Yes.
And I've seen both.
Yes.
And I'd say, although on the face of it there's a similarity, you do seem quite different. Have you had any contact with them?
I haven't had any contact with them at all, no, other than sitting in their audience.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen them before we came to the Fringe, so I've seen them now 3 times at the Fringe. No contact at all. It is so different. When you think about it, you think, it's an improvised music, it's very similar, but when you look at what they're doing, it's a very, very different skill. They're obviously all professional comedians of sort, and their scenes are very funny, and they have a director on stage who you can kind of get yourself. It's almost a free laugh, because you can. The thing with improvising is the audience. The audience want to see you get out of holes, so they want to see you get yourself into something horrible, and they want to see how's he going to get himself out. And what they do is they have a director who stands up and goes, "No idea why I wrote that. What I meant to write was actually she loves him very much," and they sing a song about how the cheese is going to affect their relationship.
I think their ultimate aim, because I've interviewed Dylan Emery, who runs the show.
Yes, he's
is actually in a way to create the perfect musical.
Yeah.
So they try to keep within the trammels of
exactly,
musical
and
genre.
It's the slickest thing you'll see, the slickest improvised show you're ever going to see. It is absolutely fantastic. But I've seen it 3 times, and it bared a striking similarity. The 3 times I saw it.
Or to each other, you mean?
Yeah, just the first song, for example, is kind of one person sings a line, 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 then someone sings a chorus, and then they all sing a chorus, and it happens the same every time. They're even in the same place on stage. But that's not to say it's worse in any way. It's just a different thing. It's just a very different. They are going for slick. We're going for, if you get yourself in a problem, you're damn well going to get yourself out of this problem. And the audience like that.
The night you went to them, by the way, you didn't go on the night that they did the Torturers one, did you?
No.
Oh, pity. They finished with a pantomime sing-along, which was just fantastic.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
No. Wow.
We even had to do the actions in the audience.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than a sleeping girl, nothing in the world. Unfortunately, it's one of those songs that stays in the mind. So I'm going to ask you the same question. Have any of the things that you've improvised, have you walked away remembering a particular song thinking, actually, I'm really proud of that?
Yes. There have been a couple. The one I mentioned earlier about the seagulls and the walrus was just fantastic. In fact, I'm going to put it on YouTube, so we'll put a link on our website to it. But yeah, that was just fantastic. And there's a song that we sang as an opening in a gym, which was great, and just a fantastic harmony at the end. And we were, whoa, that's awesome! And there have been songs that I can remember. It's the that was one from last night, I think. I've got bits and pieces of tunes in my head, and yeah, I think it's really funny. Actually, Gav finds himself often accidentally quoting songs that exist, and you'll get a song that kind of starts, and you're like, is he about to play Les Mis? And then, no, there he goes. As he, because his fingers are doing all. He's not even thinking. I don't think. Yeah.
It's doodling, isn't it? In its
exactly.
true sense.
Yeah. But yeah, no, stuff does stick. And I've heard audience members humming things on the way out, which is awesome. To hear an audience member humming or singing something that you've just made up.
Audience reaction. I mean, you've been selling very well.
We sold out every night. Yeah.
All right, do better than that then.
Yes. Actually, we did. We sold 60 tickets one night in our 50-seat venue because C decided, and 56 one night. People were sat on the steps.
Oh, really?
Yes. It was one of the first couple, and I don't think they quite sorted out their box office system.
Yeah. It's eccentric at the C venues. I'm not asking you to comment, but from my point of view, it seems eccentric.
Yes. No. It's on C venues. Before we talk about audience reaction, it's such. We were here last year at the Pleasance, and C is such a tight-knit community. This is obviously very slick. It's very commercial. You do very well because they advertise you and blah 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 blah. But C is just so nice. You go in and everybody there, and you know Catherine, the marketing.
Hell of a lot of shows as well.
And there's millions of them, absolutely millions of them. So many venues.
So many, yeah.
And they've got C Central, they've got C2, they've got C Cubed.
Soco.
Yeah, C Soco, where we are, yeah, it's massive. Audience reaction, yeah, really good, really good. And obviously the shows we try to tailor to the audience. So, if they find something funny, if they find Ed funny, Ed, get on stage, be funny. If they like the songs, it's we'll do more rhyming. We'll try and get more songs into this show. If they're not particularly fussed about the songs, we'll get more dialogue in. And if there's kids in, we'll make sure there's some funny, pantomime, slapstick, or there's a funny, there's a kid in it. For example, sometimes we've had one time we had a kid in the show because there were kids in the audience, and obviously they relate. Nick played a kid. I played a kid as well. My voice doesn't really suit a kid. They react very well to seeing themselves on stage and asking questions.
Also,
about
in a slightly silly. I mean, I think kids love silly.
Yeah.
And it's silly in droves here, isn't it?
Yes, they us being silly, and then my dad Mike saying, so you're finally going to have a friend to play with. We're going to make you a little brother or sister, and me going, how? Where does it come from? Kind of thing. And so suddenly the parents are all going, you're not about to tell them, are you? No. And at 5:30 we're a very clean show, so no swearing, no. And occasionally you get some people in who are drunk or whatever, and the suggestions they shout out are not particularly clean. You have to kind of laugh them off. So.
I mean, in a way, you do have to do that with any show where you're drawing in stuff from the public, because they will throw in stuff which is just inappropriate anyway, not necessarily just stuff which is so out there, but you can't actually do anything with it.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Tell me I'm wrong.
We've actually recently been trying to take basically the most wacky suggestions we can take. And Get Your Walrus off the stage, Mrs. Worthington is fairly out there, but just because the sense of the kind of reward you get at the end, and the audience's faces when they see something coming, and they're like, that's how they're going to do it. Yeah. That's how they're going to get that into the show, and that really is what makes it.
The sound of the communal penny dropping.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was this one with the pregnancy. We started with a scene with him saying, they're pregnant. I'm pregnant. I've just got this test in the post, and it's got a green dot on it. I'm pregnant. I've had 3 of them now. Next scene, we cut to Alex sat on his own, colouring in dots on a thing, and then singing a song about being colourblind. And it didn't drop with the audience until like 4 or 5 scenes later, when they got a message from the guy saying, sorry, I think they may have been wrong. The guy doing it can't tell the difference between red and green, so you've probably got an incorrect result.
So it turned out not to be an immediate joke, but a trapdoor, as it
was.
Yes.
It was amazing. And we all look at it, because we know each other, so I don't know whether it was that obvious, but because we know each other's humour so well, and etc., we all just went, very clever. And when the audience didn't see it, it gave us so much power to kind of just start hinting at things and start bringing things in, and it's just...
Well, it gave you a plot arc, didn't it?
Exactly.
Perhaps if it had just been a joke, it's a joke, but as you say, it gives you a narrative drive.
Exactly.
Before we go on to how people can see this show, there's just one question I'm desperate to ask. You're called No Shoes Theatre. Yes. I noticed yesterday you weren't wearing shoes. I'm seeing that, except one member of your cast.
Yes.
Who was in right old clodhoppers, if I may say.
Yes, it was... was it Mike? Okay, yeah. The name No Shoes came out of a discussion again about equally random names we could call our show, and it came down to Off the Cuff, which is obviously very not random, and No Shoes, and because we do things that aren't improvised as well, it was, how do you pick something off the cuff? Obviously you think, well, it's improvised, it's off the cuff. How do you pick something that's people are going to go, wow, that's a really interesting name, you know, they're creative or whatever, but doesn't lead you towards improvisation. And it's just completely random. And yes, I don't really like wearing shoes on stage when I'm improvising. For some reason, it makes it more difficult, I think.
That's where your brain is, then.
Yeah.
Improvisational feet.
Lets out my improvised energy, yeah. But no, it's not. We wear shoes, we don't wear shoes, whatever. One night I forgot to take them off, so there you go.
What next for the group? After Edinburgh, is this going anywhere else? Is this presumably something you can keep in your rag bag for doing?
Exactly. The other great thing about it is you don't have to. One thing we've learned is that it's not like riding a bike. If we stop, if we don't perform, if we don't rehearse, you don't need to perform, but rehearsing. If we don't rehearse for even 2 days, 3 days, it starts exponentially disappearing, the ability to do it, and because it's so much about knowing what people are going to do. As soon as you let that go, you lose a connection that you've had to each other and the connection that you've had to Gav on the keyboard and things. You just lose it completely. And we'd come back. We had a week off at one point. We were like, everyone needs to go and see their family. Blah blah blah. We'll have a week off, and we came back the next week, and we were rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. No. Yeah, no, this is in rehearsals.
But that's part of learning, isn't it? I suppose. So it's exactly like being an athlete. Then you do need to keep yourself in
You absolutely need to be keeping yourself. Yeah. So in order to take it on, obviously we'd need to keep going, but I'm sure we will keep rehearsing and things. Next, I just don't know. I mean, I'm doing visual effects on a film for a while in the next 6 months. Somebody recommended me it's amazing what you fall into. And also building a system that measures the peripheral vision in young children in hospitals to diagnose brain tumours. So
that's the weekend sorted.
That's the weekend sorted, and then this, so many things. This has kind of came from York, and there's so many things here from York. There's Faustus, and there's the belt up stuff, and there's the Shambles improvised stand-up stuff. So many people doing things in York that it's really, really good. And whether or not, I don't know. I really don't know what we're going to do with it. I'd love to do it somewhere else. Love to do it in a bigger theatre. Love to
see where you can take it. Really.
Exactly. But
But for the time being, then, how can people come and see you in Edinburgh?
Right, we are on at 5:30 every day in C Soco, which is on Chambers Street in the C main venue. Get your tickets in advance. It's sometimes difficult to get them on the day.
Do you have a website?
Yes, noshoestheatre.co.uk, and we have a link to our Facebook page and our Twitter page and our whatnot. As I said, soon there'll be a link to our YouTube page, and we're going to get some videos up so people can have a look. And hopefully, when we get some videos up, people will actually realise how improvised it is when they can look at 20 videos of us singing a song and go, no, they are actually all different.
And who can bother write if you're going to write 20 songs professionally beforehand?
Yeah,
you just do a musical.
Yes, exactly. That's the other thing, isn't it? Why lie to people and
work for yourself?
Yeah, I don't know. And also, when we mess up, it's kind of. Do you not think we would have not sung the wrong note there if we'd already prearranged? But whatever. Yeah.
We'll put your website link on our website as well.
Great.
So hopefully people will carry on seeing it from there.
Great.
Michael, thank you very much indeed.
And thank you very much, Thos.
It's Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Fringe. But just to prove that Edinburgh isn't the only arts festival going on, here's Tim Saward, who was speaking to Jennifer Toxvig, who's a famous writer of musicals, about a new show taking place this very week at the Grimeborn Festival.
Lots of talk about the Edinburgh Festival at the moment, but at the moment also in London there is running the Grimeborn Festival. Grimeborn is a play on Glyndebourne, and it's an opera festival which is unconventional. I'm here with Jennifer Toxvig, who is co-writing one of the most, unusual shows to appear in the festival. What's the show?
It's called The Work of Art, and basically it's two writers going through the writing process from scratch in front of an audience. We're inspired by pentimento, which is a term that is used in oil painting when the top layer of paint becomes transparent and you can see where the artist made a different choice before and then changed his mind. So we have two paintings to work from, and I have two different composers to work with, and we'll be creating a musical moment for the artist who changed his mind in that particular work of art. And the idea is that the audience will see us go through the writing process during the evening, and then at the end of the evening they'll see the art that we've created, but they'll have seen the work that's gone into it as well. So it's a little bit scary for us and a little bit crazy.
So what will the audience actually see when they're sitting watching you writing?
They will actually see us writing. I mean, they'll see what they would see if they were sitting in one of our living rooms and we were there writing. They'll have to join in, which means that mobile phones get left on, because sometimes when I'm writing, my mother calls and interrupts me, and I want it to be an authentic process. And also someone will have to put the kettle on at some point, and we'll ask the audience to be our Google, because we won't have access to the internet. So they'll take part in many different ways.
So it's part of Grindborn, which is a sort of an opera festival. Is that really what you'll get to hear at the end? Will it be opera, or what will it be?
It probably won't be traditional opera. It will certainly be music theatre. But because I have two very different composers that I'm working with, I actually have no idea what style of music it will be, which is quite exciting. I'll be working with Steve Edis is the first one that I'll be working with, and he's done a lot of composing for the National Theatre, plays and instrumental kind of orchestral music, and then I'll be working with Harvey Brough from Harvey and the Wallbangers, which is a completely different style of music. So it's quite exciting to find out what we're going to have on the evening. And also we'll be joined by some lovely actors. Nigel Richards, who's currently covering The Phantom, is going to be playing games with us that evening, and also Matthew Woodyard and Emma Manton, and some fantastic actors who will come and give us their improvisational genius.
Splendid. So that's running as part of the Grindborn Festival. When can you see it?
You can come and see it on Friday the 28th and Saturday the 29th in the evening. I think it starts at 8 o'clock, but you can find out more on the Arcola Theatre website.
So it's running at the Arcola Theatre, which is in Dalston in London, as part of the Grindborn Festival. So if you're in London, you might want to run down and catch it. The Grindborn Festival also features a number of other performances of both opera and music theatre and musical theatre. In fact, you can see Rosemary Ash on the 4th of September, Friday, as well, performing a selection of music theatre pieces by a variety of writers, including people like Adam Gettel and Michael John LaCusa. And you mentioned Nigel Richards there, of course, and he's just got a CD out which is called A Shining Truth, which is also full of contemporary musical theatre songs by contemporary musical theatre writers, including some of the people I've just mentioned. So that's the work of art this Friday and Saturday at the Arcola Theatre in London.
It's Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Fringe. Well, that's it from Musical Talk for this week. I hope you've enjoyed this little insight into the Edinburgh Fringe. And remember, it's still going, at least for the remainder of this week. So, if you get a chance, do go along. It's one of the most wonderful experiences anyone who loves theatre can possibly go to. If you want to hear more about any of the shows we've discussed today, or about the Fringe in general, go to our website, www.musicaltalk.co.uk, and you'll be able to find various internet addresses and links. There's only time now to say, do tune in again next week, because that will be a very special episode of Musical Talk, our 150th edition, and we got a very unusual and I hope very entertaining show, specially for you. And I don't mind telling you, the editing has given me a tin ear and shorter fingers than I had last week. So that's our special 150th episode next week. But for the moment, from Tim Saward and myself, Thos Ribbits, we say goodbye and good musical theatre to you all. Copyright Musical Talk 2009. And now for some musical festival out-talks. But he isn't in it. I'll say that again. But he isn't actually in it. That'll go in the outtakes. I'm so sorry.
Excellent.
At 10:35 in the morning at Space at Venue 45, run by the lovely Charles Pamment. And if you bring one of our flyers down, you get 2 for 1. And we welcome children, families, and dogs of any description.
I won't ask which category I fall into. Thank you. That was wonderful. Splendid. I'll just ask you a few questions. We'll take it from there and see how long it takes. Is that
okay.
all right?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
If you come to I want you to feel comfortable. So if you say anything you hadn't said, or you've libelled all your friends, do say. If we don't use that.
Oh God, the show yesterday was about Sainsbury's and had Jamie Oliver in it. I think we've libelled everyone already. As long as there was nobody from Sainsbury's there, we should be all right.
Oh, you'd have heard by now.
Yes.
You'd have been pelted to death with economy tomato cans.
yeah, by Jamie Oliver.
Yeah. It was very funny, though, I have to say.
Yeah, quite not a very well-known one, and quite an odd kind of introduction to the whole Gilbert and Sullivan style.
It's nobody's favourite, sadly. The sorcerer.
It's a strange one, but it was good fun anyway.
Well, just historically, I know that one person argues that's the first
proper musical ever
Yeah.
because it's the first one with dialogue. It's not sung through.
Oh, is it really?
Because all the ones before that were...
We're just plain singing. Ah.
Yeah. So some
Now we
people
know.
argue that's the first modern musical.
Oh, exciting. I didn't know that. See, a complete novice to the whole thing.
Were you getting wet? I think every now and then it runs... small amounts run down this arm, and I think it's probably where that joint is, to be honest. I will live with it, as long as it doesn't land on the equipment. I'm expendable. This isn't.
This is not, no.
My fault, I hit my record button twice. Try again.
You speak perfect prose, actually, if I may say. They come straight out.
The last thing,
Nary an in it.
The last thing my mother said before I said, "Oh, I'm doing this interview," she said, "Just take a deep breath and think before you speak." Because I have a bit of a...
Talk first thing.
Yes,
I know. I
yes,
took that.
exactly.
Oh no, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Mark, I have to say, you also perform marvellously in a slightly difficult. So as the coach pulls up, they stand, they jump on the. What are they doing?
I was a bit confused about that. Yeah. And a friend I know from school just walked past.
Oh really?
From Bristol.
Oh, fantastic!
Which was quite odd.
Oh, you credibility there.
Yeah,
thank you.
exactly.
Started. Oh, Gordon Bennett. I can't remember where they started.